Catelyn Stark stood upon the ramparts of Riverrun in the lilac light of early morning, her breath a pale cloud against the chill air, her mind a tempest. Each dawn brought a flicker of possibility, some slender hope that life need not continue as a relentless progression of tragedy. She heard the lap of the river beneath the walls and felt the ancient stones beneath her palm, as if the fortress might share its enduring strength with her. Her heart ached from the memory of Ned's death, from the knowledge that her daughters were captives in a city rife with enemies, and from the heavy burden that war had laid upon her shoulders. Yet in the restless hours before the sun rose fully, a wild notion had taken root in her mind. She had woken with an idea that would either save her family or condemn them to ruin. She would try to forge peace with Tywin Lannister. She could almost hear Ned's voice whispering caution in her ear. He would have weighed every scruple carefully, every potential betrayal, every advantage or risk. But Ned was gone, and Catelyn had found there was little comfort in the caution that had failed to preserve him. She could not allow the same outcome for her son, for Robb, or for Sansa and Arya, wherever they might be hidden within the walls of the Red Keep. The North and the Riverlands were battered by violence, men dying under a king her son had become too quickly, pressed on all sides by enemies. And there was Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, ruthless and cunning, rumored to have no heart at all. Yet she had seen a man behind the hardened reputation, even if only in fleeting glimpses during the chaos of the war. She began to wonder whether Tywin might see reason where others saw only a monster. Robb had declared himself king in the north, and the realm was splintered in all directions. Stannis and Renly made their claims to the Iron Throne, the Greyjoys turned to raiding, the Freys made every alliance a labyrinth of uncertainty. Amid the bloodshed, perhaps Tywin Lannister, as cold and strategic as he was, would have used for a pact. The idea was madness, but in the swirl of madness that the realm had become, it might also be the only path leading out of a pit of corpses. She descended from the ramparts, her gray cloak trailing behind her. The household guards saluted, a gesture she accepted without heed, her mind in another place. She passed through the corridors of Riverrun, the keep that had been her childhood home, and found her brother Edmure in the great hall, poring over maps with the black lines of worry etched deep into his face. Robb was not yet within these walls, he was off on another campaign, planning with his bannermen. If she was to set this plan in motion, it would have to begin here, with quiet talks and an even quieter departure. Edmure, she said, her voice carrying a confidence she only partially felt. I must speak with you. He looked up, surprise mingling with the weight of leadership in his gaze. Sister, he replied, rising to greet her. Is everything well? You look as though you've not slept. I haven't, she admitted. Nor do I expect to find much rest until we have a plan for how to bring this war to an end. He offered her a seat. She accepted, leaning forward so that her dark auburn hair caught the torchlight and the flicker of flames revealed the strain on her features. You know as well as I do that Robb's victories can only do so much, she said softly. Even if he wins every battle, what remains of our armies afterward? We'd be bled dry. We can hold the river, the north might stand, but the cost is too high. Edmure frowned, leaning his elbows on the table. We are already committed. And Tywin Lannister has shown no mercy. You can't truly believe he'll negotiate in good faith. I believe, said Catelyn, finding a calm that surprised even herself, that he wants his legacy to endure. He wants his house to prosper. War is costly, and he is not a man who wastes resources lightly. If we offer him something of equal or greater value than continued bloodshed, perhaps we can strike a bargain. Sansa is in their hands, and Arya too, if she's still in King's Landing. That alone might move me to do whatever is necessary if there's a chance to secure their safety. Edmure's shoulders sagged. He toyed with a small wooden figurine representing one of their armies on the map, a piece of carved oak. And what would you offer him, Cat? The king in the north bending the knee? A concession of land? We cannot betray the North's newfound cause for independence, not without Robb's agreement and not without the approval of his bannermen, either. A hint of bitterness laced her smile. Would the North accept peace that preserves their sons if it means compromise? The men might not be so eager. But I must try. War has claimed too many lives already. She paused, her voice gathering more resolve. Let me ride to Harrenhal. That is where Tywin Lannister was last known to be. I will speak to him as a mother, as a woman who has lost much and is willing to do what it takes to end this suffering. Edmure made a soft sound of disbelief. You mean to walk directly into the lion's den? You already took Tyrion once, and that led to so many complications. Do you think Tywin will not simply take you prisoner the moment you show your face? I think, Catelyn said, that he will not want more shame brought upon his house. He will know that capturing me outright would be an act of petty vengeance, and it would yield no benefit if I come under the flag of truce. If he wishes to negotiate, I may find him open to words. If he spurns me, well then we know what kind of peace we can have. But I must try. Edmure laced his fingers together. We would need to arrange safe conduct. Perhaps a letter to Tywin's camp guaranteeing that you travel without threat. And if he fails to honor it, then we have lost nothing but one more life, she said quietly, and perhaps you would call the banners to avenge me. But I would rather you focus on defending our people. This endless war, she exhaled. It must find its end. He studied her, and she saw the conflict in her brother's eyes. They were Tully eyes, a shade of clear blue, and in them she saw love, fear, and a spark of resignation. I cannot stop you, he said at last, though I wish I could. Let me at least help you make arrangements. We'll send word to Robb, of course. She swallowed. Of course. He may object, but I cannot wait for his permission. Time is precious. Within the day, she had a small retinue gathered, a handful of trusted knights, men who had sworn to House Tully, each carrying a white banner of truce. The letter was dispatched by Raven to Harrenhal announcing her intention to speak with Lord Tywin under terms of safe conduct. She prayed that the old man, if as calculating as rumor claimed, would not see immediate advantage in taking her captive. The journey was fraught with tension and the unrelenting awareness that an unseen enemy might lurk behind every tree. They rode swiftly, avoiding major roads when they could, picking their way along the winding banks of the river until Harrenhal's black towers rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, stained by ancient dragon fire. The approach felt like entering the maw of a beast, the thick walls looming, the courtyard large enough to swallow entire armies. Harrenhal was a monument to both ambition and doom, and Catelyn felt a foreboding chill as they drew near. At the gates, the men bearing Lannister colors emerged to greet them. The white banner of truce fluttered, and after a tense moment, the gates yawned open. One of Tywin's knights, a stern-faced man with gold lion sigils, escorted her party inside. Catelyn's heart pounded in her chest as they entered the courtyard. She recalled the stories of Harrenhal's many curses, of how every house that held it eventually fell to ruin. In that moment, she wondered if she might be sealing her own doom. But she set her jaw and steeled herself. She came here for her daughters, for Robb, for the sake of halting the devastation. A steward led her through the labyrinthine halls, and soon enough, she found herself before Tywin Lannister in what had once been the great hall of Harrenhal. He sat at the high table, framed by torches that seemed to do little to dispel the gloom. His presence was austere as ever, pale green eyes like glass, skin pulled tight across high cheekbones, hair the color of beaten gold turning to white at the temples. His hands rested upon the table, fingers steepled. He wore a black doublet embroidered with the golden lion, understated but no less regal for its simplicity. Around him stood a number of his bannermen and soldiers, each one watchful, bristling with attention that matched the darkness of the great hall. She bowed stiffly, refusing to let fear tremble in her limbs. "Lord Tywin," she said, using every ounce of composure she had practiced as the Lady of Winterfell. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." His gaze was unreadable. "Lady Catelyn," he replied, voice as smooth and hard as polished stone. "You come under the banner of truce. That is a dangerous thing, I find, in these troubled times. Men speak of peace, and behind their words, they sharpen knives." She met his eyes, unwavering. "I have no knives, my lord. Only a proposal that might benefit us both." The faintest arch of a brow. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a seat across from him. His men did not move from their positions, but they parted just enough for her to pass. She eased into the seat, inwardly conscious of how vulnerable she was. Though her guard had accompanied her, they were far outnumbered in this fortress. Tywin regarded her a moment longer, then leaned forward. "Your letter spoke of peace. Yet your son was crowned king in the north, a rebellious act if ever there was one. Why should I entertain the notion of terms, Lady Stark?" She swallowed, choosing her words carefully. "Because too much blood has been shed already. My husband, Lord Eddard, was executed in King's Landing, and in response, my son took up arms. If this war continues, thousands more will die. I do not doubt House Lannister's strength. But I also know the cost of prolonged conflict, and you know it as well." His gaze flickered, assessing. "You speak of cost. What would you have me pay? Or what do you imagine I might demand, in order to turn war into peace?" She did not falter, though the effort to keep her voice steady was immense. "First, I want the release of my daughters Sansa and Arya. I wish them returned to me without condition. A silence hung in the hall, broken only by the whisper of a distant draft. Tywin drummed his fingers on the table. That is your wish. But what of mine? Catelyn took a breath. If King Joffrey holds the Iron Throne and you are his hand or will stand beside him in power, I would see the North recognize that. But in turn, you must recognize Robb's dominion in the North. Let there be two realms, if that is what it takes. The North to govern itself and the Crown to hold the rest. No more meddling in each other's affairs. She paused. I do not expect you to accept easily, but think of the alternative. A war that might last for years, draining House Lannister of gold, men, and perhaps its reputation for swift, decisive victory. He studied her, eyes gleaming with the calculations that danced behind them. Finally, he said, a partition of the 7 kingdoms? A king in the north while the boy on the Iron Throne remains a Lannister in all but name? You expect me to accept that, after you seized my son Tyrion, after your boy humiliated my armies in the field. War is war, said Catelyn, and your house seized my husband and executed him. Both sides have much to forgive if we are to find peace. Tywin tilted his head slightly. Forgive? I do not indulge in forgiveness, Lady Stark. But I do engage in bargains that advance my family's position. And indeed, peace might be more profitable than war. My resources are better spent solidifying the crown and ensuring Lannister interests than chasing your son across the riverlands. She clung to that slender opening. Then you see reason, she ventured. We can negotiate the details, come to terms that do not leave one side in utter disgrace. His lips thinned. You think too kindly of me, my lady. I see advantage. You come as a supplicant offering me a chance to end this conflict in exchange for your daughter's safety and your son's sovereignty in the north. And what if I demand more? Compensation for my lost men, lost coin, the years of war that have already begun. If you demand too much, then we will fight on, said Catelyn, forcing an edge into her voice. She realized it might be the only language Tywin respected, resolve. I did not come to beg. I came to propose a solution that spares both sides needless destruction. There was a long pause. She could feel the tension coiling in her chest, in the hush of the hall, in the watchfulness of the assembled knights. At length, Tywin shifted. We will talk, Lady Stark. It may be that I can be convinced to entertain this, but the terms must suit the crown and House Lannister. You will remain here, under watch, while we draft the necessary outlines of an agreement. You have my word that no harm will befall you so long as you do not test my patience. She inclined her head. Thank you. His eyes flicked to one of his knights. Show Lady Stark to chambers befitting her station. Have her attendants treated with respect. Ensure no rumor of violence touches them. Then he returned his gaze to her. I trust you will not attempt anything foolish. We may both be spurred by desperation, but I am not a man to cross, as you surely know. A faint tremor ran through her, but she held her composure. I do, she said, and then allowed the knight to guide her out. That first night in Harrenhal, she found little rest. The bedchamber she was given was dark and drafty despite the fires lit in the hearth. She thought of Ned, how he would have insisted on justice for all the blood spilled, how he might have refused to kneel to any Lannister, or how he might have weighed each word with an honesty that had cost him his life. Yet she also remembered his love for their children, for the people of the North. She prayed he would understand the risk she was taking. She rose early. The next days blurred into a series of tense negotiations. Tywin did not conduct them himself at first, preferring to send various envoys, lords loyal to him, men skilled in extracting the maximum from an agreement. Catelyn parried every demand with caution and a firm sense of the lines she would not cross. She would not abandon Robb's claim to the north. She would not yield control over the riverlands. She would not see any harm come to her daughters, nor would she betray the cause for which Ned had died. And yet, compromise was needed. Gradually, the discussions shaped the basic framework of a treaty. The North would be allowed to govern itself, provided that it recognized the nominal authority of King Joffrey in King's Landing. An arrangement that included annual tributes and a pledge to remain neutral in the conflicts of the southern kingdoms. The Riverlands, allied with the North, would also join in that arrangement, though their lords would have to reaffirm vassalage to the Iron Throne in name, if not in practice. In exchange, Tywin would ensure the release of Sansa and Arya, and he would call off his forces from further assaults on the Tully territories. All of this, however, remained contingent on Robb Stark's agreement, and on Tywin's acceptance that a fracturing of the Seven Kingdoms was the lesser evil compared to open war with the North. The biggest question hung unspoken between them. Could Joffrey be compelled to accept such terms? Tywin assured her that the king would do as he was told, for a wise ruler listened to his hand and to his grandsire. But Catelyn knew Joffrey's nature was cruel and capricious. Still, Tywin insisted. If he commanded it, Joffrey would comply. She sensed in Tywin a growing impatience, though. On the one hand, he recognized the advantage of a swift conclusion. On the other, his pride bristled at the notion of bending to any arrangement that diminished Lannister supremacy. His men whispered that Tywin wanted an unconditional surrender, or that he would find a way to break this treaty once he had Sansa and Arya in his hands again. The negotiations were a dance of veiled threats and tenuous concessions. On the 8th day, Tywin summoned Catelyn to the same great hall, but this time, he was alone except for a few guards. The emptiness of the vast space seemed to amplify her every footstep. She approached the table, and he lifted a goblet of wine to his lips, then gestured for her to take the seat opposite him. "We are near to an agreement," he said, voice clipped. "Yet there is one point that troubles me. You have said that King Robb will never again march south, nor ally with my enemies. But what if he changes his mind? What if he one day decides he wishes to march upon the capital, or meddle in the affairs of other claimants to the throne? How do I ensure lasting peace, not just a respite?" Catelyn straightened. "I can give no absolute guarantee, my lord. Men's hearts change, and alliances shift. But if we finalize these terms, we will have the North's word, sealed by oath. We are not oath-breakers. Our gods do not look kindly on that." Tywin's lips curved faintly in something that might have been the ghost of a smile. "Your son is young, and youth can be reckless. But I will accept his oath if you swear that you, Lady Stark, will remain in King's Landing as a guest, an honored guest, mind you, until enough time has passed to ensure that your son abides by the treaty." Her heart skipped. "You propose that I remain as a hostage," she said, her tone carefully devoid of emotion. He inclined his head. "Hostage is an ugly word. But yes, in effect. Or shall we call it a surety? The mother of the king in the north in the capital, safe and respected, ensuring that no betrayal occurs." Catelyn pressed her lips together. "I see. And my daughters? They would remain with you," he said, and at her sharp intake of breath, he clarified, "Sansa is already there. Arya's location is uncertain, but the crown is making efforts to find her. Should we locate the girl, we will reunite her with you as well. Think of it, mother and daughters, alive and safe, close to the seat of power. Meanwhile, your son rules the north without interference. If this arrangement stands for a year, 2 years, perhaps, then we can speak again of your eventual return. By then, perhaps trust will have grown." She wanted to protest, to refuse, to say that this was nothing short of a golden cage. But the memory of Ned's head on a spike haunted her. The memory of Sansa's tears, of little Arya lost in the chaos, fueled her determination. "Very well," she said quietly. "If this is the price of peace, I will pay it." Tywin studied her for a moment. "You were more pragmatic than your husband was, Lady Stark." That comment stung, but she masked her pain. "He died for his honor," she said. "I live for my children." He nodded as if in approval, then sipped his wine. "Then let us finalize these arrangements. I will send riders to King's Landing to ensure everything is prepared. You will come south, where you will be presented at court as a guest of the crown in recognition of the new peace. In turn, your son will call off his banners, withdraw from the war, and pledge that neither he nor his vassals will raise arms against House Lannister or its allies." They spoke for hours, Hammeryn. G out details. Catelyn's retinue, half of whom would remain behind to return to Robb with the terms. The safe passage guaranteed by Lannister host. The exchange of hostages. Sansa for a short time remained Joffrey's betrothed, though in the privacy of these talks, Catelyn insisted that marriage was not part of the treaty. Tywin did not press the issue, perhaps because Joffrey's betrothal to Sansa was already recognized, or perhaps because he had other plans in mind. And so, by the waning light of evening, Catelyn rose from the negotiation table, her entire body vibrating with tension, her heart heavy with both fear and a fraught sort of hope. If Robb accepted these terms, the North might be spared. Sansa might be freed from the tyranny of the royal court. Arya might be found, safe at last. The cost was her own liberty and a certain measure of pride. But she reminded herself that pride had cost them Ned's life. She would not pay with anyone else's blood if she could help it. She returned to her chamber where she packed her few belongings. Her knights waited, uncertain, in the corridor. "My lady?" one asked, glancing worriedly at her expression. "We have come to an agreement with Lord Tywin," she said simply. "We ride to King's Landing." The man's eyes widened. "That is a dangerous place, my lady." "Are you certain?" "No," she confessed. "But it must be done." Within a day, they left Harrenhal under a banner of Lannister escort. The fields around the fortress bore scars of war, burned villages, ravaged farmlands. She grieved for the small folk whose suffering had gone unremarked while lords played their Game of Thrones. If this new peace could be made to hold, perhaps fewer villages would burn. Perhaps fewer children would lose their parents. Perhaps the realm would start to heal. They traveled by the main road, the retinue attracting stares from travelers and peasants who witnessed something that looked like an alliance, or at least a forced truce, between Tully and Lannister. Whispers ran ahead of them, rumors sprouting like weeds. By the time they reached the outskirts of King's Landing, the gates were abuzz with talk. The gold cloaks parted to let them pass. Catelyn could see the red keep rising on its promontory above the city, the banners of House Baratheon, no, House Lannister in truth flapping in the breeze. She swallowed her trepidation as she rode under the looming portcullis. King's Landing had never felt so alien. She remembered how she had once come to find Ned, after Bran's fall, discovering intrigue and poison in every corridor. Now she returned under the watchful eye of Lannister guards. They took her to the keep where the bustle of the court thronged. Servants rushed to and fro, knights in polished armor stood guard, and lords in their finery cast curious glances as she dismounted in the courtyard. She was escorted inside, straight to the throne room, where Joffrey sat perched upon the Iron Throne like a boy king playing at greatness. By his side, the Queen Regent Cersei Lannister stood poised with her emerald eyes narrowed in skepticism. She was every bit as regal and forbidding as Catelyn remembered. Catelyn knelt upon the cold marble floor, mindful of the stares and whispers echoing through the hall. Tywin stood to the side, watching. She offered the barest courtesy. Joffrey's voice rang out petulantly. "Is this the woman who dared to speak against my mother? Who took my uncle prisoner?" Cersei placed a hand on Joffrey's arm. "Peace, my sweet." She turned her gaze on Catelyn. "We have been told you come with terms of a treaty, that your rebellious son seeks to lay down his arms and be pardoned for his treason." Catelyn rose slowly. "My son seeks peace," she said, choosing each word with care. "In accordance with Lord Tywin's wishes, he will respect the crown's authority and withdraw his forces from the field, provided that the North is free to govern itself without interference. Further, we ask for the safe return of my daughters." Cersei's lips curled in a perfunctory smile. "Sansa is here, quite safe under our protection. As for your younger girl, we have men searching. She fled the city, it seems, in the chaos after your husband's." Cersei paused, letting the memory of Ned's execution hang in the air. "Trial. We hope to find her soon." Joffrey shifted, clearly bored or annoyed at having to listen to the details. "Mother, can't I just punish her for—" "Hush!" Cersei hissed, a flash of anger in her green eyes. She masked it quickly and addressed Catelyn in a tone that was all smooth courtesy. "You will remain here, as a guest of the crown, so long as this peace endures. And, of course, we hope that your son will not cause further trouble." Catelyn sensed the danger in the Queen Regent's politeness. "Still," she replied, "I thank you for your hospitality, your grace." That evening, she was shown to a suite of rooms in Maegor's Holdfast, a place within the Red Keep's innermost stronghold. The rooms were elegantly furnished, but the heavy presence of guards outside made them feel more like a cage than a palace. She requested to see Sansa, and after a long wait, her daughter was brought to her. The moment Sansa entered, pale and trembling in a gown of soft blue, tears sprang to Catelyn's eyes. She embraced the girl, feeling how thin she had become, how fragile her shoulders felt beneath the silk. "My sweet girl," she murmured, stroking her hair. "Mother," Sansa whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. I was so afraid when they said you were coming here. Joffrey? She trailed off, trembling with memories of his cruelty. Catelyn held her tight, her voice soft with reassurance. "Hush, child. I'm here now. We're forging peace, and I will not let them harm you. We must endure for a while longer, but I will do everything I can to keep you safe. She glanced at the guards posted at the door, mindful of ears everywhere. We must speak carefully, she murmured, but know that your brother is well, and the North stands behind him. He has not forsaken you. Sansa nodded, a fragile sort of hope lighting her eyes. Thank you. Oh, mother, how I've wished to see you. They stayed together for a time, mother and daughter reunited in a city that had taken so much from them. Yet Catelyn felt a measure of relief that at least one daughter was safe in her arms for now. Arya's absence weighed on her heart like a stone, but she prayed the girl had found some measure of protection. In the days that followed, the new arrangement began to settle into place. Ravens flew from the Red Keep to the various lords, announcing a cessation of hostilities. Tywin Lannister's command to recall the royal armies from the Riverlands was issued, though smaller garrisons remained to ensure the Queen's interests. Word reached them that Robb Stark's bannermen were pulling back as well, halting raids and fortifying the neck rather than pressing further south. In formal letters, Robb acknowledged King Joffrey's rule over the south while maintaining that the north would remain free and independent. For many lords at court, it was an uncomfortable compromise, particularly for those who had wanted total victory over the rebellious north. But Tywin's iron will, backed by his control of the gold that funded the crown, silenced much of the protest. Cersei's position was more precarious. She needed peace to keep her hold on power, to manage the realm's finances, and to quell the threat of both Stannis and Renly Baratheon. If the North was no longer an enemy, that allowed her to focus on the rivalry that was brewing among the Baratheons and any potential dangers from overseas. Catelyn found herself navigating the courtly intrigues of King's Landing like a traveler in a hostile land. Every polite conversation was tinged with hidden barbs, every courtesy dripping with suspicion. She had to smile graciously at Margaery Tyrell, who had come to the city as Renly's bride before that alliance crumbled. She had to endure glances from Peter Baelish, who had once professed to love her. Varys appeared and disappeared with unsettling knowledge. She had to feign respect for Joffrey, who looked at her with disdain one moment and forced politeness the next, under his mother's watchful eye. But the worst by far was those moments when Cersei would visit her chambers, weaving casual conversation with venomous undertones. One afternoon, Cersei arrived unannounced, dismissing the guards to speak with Catelyn in private. "How are your accommodations?" the Queen asked, her tone coolly polite. "They are sufficient," Catelyn answered, keeping her face neutral. Cersei wandered the room, brushing her fingers over the carved arm of a chair. "You understand that you are here as a guest," she said, letting the word linger. "It is in everyone's best interest that we appear cordial. But do not mistake appearances for trust. I have no illusions, Your Grace." "Good." Cersei turned, her green eyes sharp. "Lord Tywin believes in this arrangement. He believes it will spare the crown further pointless strife while we deal with the Baratheon pretenders. And in truth, I see the sense in it. Yet do not think for a moment I have forgotten your boy's so-called victories, or that I have forgiven your late husband's meddling in affairs that were none of his concern." Catelyn felt her anger stir, but she kept her voice low. "I have not asked for your forgiveness. Neither have I forgotten what was done to my husband, nor to my daughters. But we have chosen peace over more blood." Cersei gave a faint smile. "So we have. Let us hope your son abides by it." With that, she inclined her head in mocking politeness and swept out, leaving behind the subtle scent of her perfume and the echo of her threat. As the days stretched into weeks, the uneasy peace held. Messages came from Riverrun and Winterfell, bearing Robb's seal. He wrote to his mother that the northern lords had resisted at first. Some called for vengeance and refused any talk of compromise. But Robb's quiet logic and sense of duty prevailed. He recalled how Ned would have put the lives of his people first. And so, though it gnawed at his heart to bend in any way to the Lannisters, he did as his mother urged, trusting that her sacrifice would bring Sansa and Arya to safety and spare the North ruin. In King's Landing, Catelyn made subtle efforts to find Arya. Rumors said the girl might have escaped the city disguised as a boy, but no one could confirm her whereabouts. When she questioned Varys, he merely shrugged and spoke in riddles about little birds and shadows on the rooftops. Frustration and worry ate at her, but she had to maintain the appearance of a compliant guest, lest she risk losing the fragile goodwill that protected Sansa. One afternoon, as she walked the palace gardens with Sansa, an activity carefully chaperoned by Lannister guards, She glimpsed Tyrion Lannister in a colonnade, watching them with curious eyes. Tyrion, the dwarf she had once held captive in the Vale, had returned to the city after his father summoned him. There was a time she had despised him, blaming him for the attempt on Bran's life, though she later realized he was innocent. Now, in this precarious peace, she wondered if he might be an ally of sorts, if only because he seemed more reasonable than his sister or nephew. He approached, offering a courteous bow. "Lady Stark, Lady Sansa, it is a delight to see you both, despite the circumstances." Catelyn inclined her head, wary. Sansa curtsied, lips pressed tight in apprehension. "Lord Tyrion, you both look well," he said, glancing at the guards who hovered near. "I've heard the new arrangement is something of an experiment, but it might just keep the realm from collapsing. My father knows how to make a deal when it suits him." Catelyn studied Tyrion's mismatched eyes. "He does indeed. And you, my lord? Do you also believe this peace can last?" He shrugged. "Last? Nothing truly lasts in King's Landing, my lady. But it may endure long enough to give us all some respite from the madness." He paused, then lowered his voice so the guards might not catch every word. "If you ever need a friendly ear, you have but to summon me. I cannot promise miracles, but I can offer a certain perspective." She could see sincerity in his gaze. Tyrion had reasons to resent his own family, Cersei especially, and he was clever enough to navigate the serpent's nest of the court. So she offered him a small nod. "Thank you, Lord Tyrion. I may do just that." He inclined his head and left them, his short steps purposeful. Sansa exhaled as if she had been holding her breath. "Do you trust him, mother?" "I trust no one here," Catelyn replied quietly. "But I believe he might be the least hostile among them. Let's return to our chambers." Time passed in this limbo with the city's gossip swirling around them. Some at court whispered that Catelyn Stark was the Lannisters' prisoner, and others said she was their secret ally. Some claimed Robb Stark had abandoned his mother to a den of lions, and others that he was the cunning wolf who had outmaneuvered Tywin. Every day, Catelyn found new rumors waiting like rats in the corridors. She ignored them, focusing on the real reason she stayed, Sansa's safety and the hope that Arya would be found. The seeds of peace, however, began to sprout. The northern trade routes reopened. Refugees from the war tentatively returned to their burned villages, hoping to rebuild. Lords in the Riverlands no longer had to fear Lannister armies sweeping across their fields. And from Winterfell came reports that Robb was busy solidifying his new role as king in the north, dealing with the recalcitrant lords of the northwestern mountains and forging alliances with the Vale, where Lisa Tully was holed up, reclusive and paranoid. Yet all was not calm. Whispers of conflict rose in the south, where Renly Baratheon had been slain under mysterious circumstances and Stannis gathered strength. The crown's attention pivoted to the threat Stannis posed. Tywin, seeing an opportunity, began redirecting his forces. He had effectively neutralized the north, at least for now. The Lannisters turned their gaze to the Stormlands, and Catelyn watched as the shifting tides of politics revealed the precarious nature of her bargain. One fateful evening, Catelyn was summoned to attend a small gathering in Cersei's Solar. She arrived to find the Queen, Lord Tywin, Tyrion, and a handful of other key figures, Pycelle, Baelish, and Varys. Wine was poured, and Cersei gestured for Catelyn to sit. A heavy sense of momentous news hung in the air. "My Lord Father has received word from his scouts," Cersei said, flicking her gaze to Tywin. "Stannis Baratheon makes ready to march on King's Landing. He has a fleet, an army. Perhaps he means to lay siege." Tywin's face was stony. "I will not allow this city to fall. We will gather our forces and meet him in the field or break his fleet. But we need every advantage. Which is why this peace treaty with the North must hold firm. So we do not fear an attack from another direction." He turned his gaze on Catelyn. "Write to your son. Impress upon him that the realm stands on the brink of chaos. If Stannis marches, your son must remain neutral or help us fight him. The crown cannot tolerate king in the north if he sits idle while the throne is threatened." Catelyn's pulse quickened. "My lord, the arrangement was that the north would remain outside these southern quarrels." A silent tension fell over the gathering. Cersei folded her hands in her lap. "Surely you do not think it fair that while the Iron Throne faces an invasion, the north sits behind its walls unscathed? If Robb Stark truly wishes peace, he should prove it by assisting the crown." Tyrion's expression was difficult to read, but Catelyn noticed the flicker of sympathy. Peter Baelish looked as though he was enjoying the predicament. Pycelle shifted, clearing his throat. Varys smiled benignly. Tywin's voice was inexorable. The realm gave you peace. It now expects your assistance. Your son need only send a token force if he does not wish to commit fully. But do not mistake. If the North stands by while the Crown fights for survival, that will be seen as an act of betrayal. Catelyn weighed her words carefully. I will write to my son. He will decide. I cannot speak for him here. Cersei smirked. But you will impress upon him the necessity of cooperation, yes? Yes, Catelyn said, though her heart sank. This was precisely how alliances turned into traps. Once Robb committed men, the North would be drawn into the war they had just escaped. But if they refused, Tywin would brand them traitors, and the fragile peace would shatter. That night, she wrote to Robb by candlelight. She explained the situation, urging caution. She told him how the Lannisters demanded northern support against Stannis, how his refusal might spark new hostilities, how she feared for Sansa if he did not comply. The tension in her words must have been palpable even on the page. Days passed before the Raven returned. When it did, Catelyn read Robb's reply in private, hands trembling. He offered measured words. He would not break the peace, but he could not send half his forces south, not without risking the safety of the North. He proposed sending a small company of archers and some foot soldiers, perhaps 1,000 men at most, to support the Crown's cause. A token gesture, but it might placate Tywin. Catelyn delivered this news to the Lannisters. Tywin's expression hardened, but he accepted it for the moment. 1,000 men is better than nothing, he allowed. They must join our host marching east under the command of one of my lieutenants. So it was settled, at least temporarily. Catelyn felt a flicker of relief that the peace might hold, that Sansa might not be punished for Robb's caution. But she worried that the realm's plunge into new war would eventually engulf them all, that the North would be pulled deeper into this chaos. And so the muster began. The Lannister forces prepared to march, and the ships in Blackwater Bay readied themselves. Catelyn was not privy to the details, but she heard the hushed talk of wildfire, of cunning plots to defend the city. She prayed that the battle would not turn into a slaughter. Amid all this, she pined for news of Arya. Each passing day that no raven arrived, no rumor placed her daughter anywhere, gnawed at her spirit. The city grew more fearful by the hour as peasants and merchants fled, anticipating a siege. Joffrey strutted about, proclaiming that Stannis would die screaming. Tyrion worked diligently to shore up the city's defenses, ignoring the Boy King's foolish boasts. Finally, the fateful day arrived when Stannis' fleet was sighted on the horizon. King's Landing braced for war. The tension crackled in the air. Civilians huddled in their homes or tried to escape through the gates. Cersei and the other ladies of the court took refuge in Maegor's Holdfast, a place of relative safety, although the fear in their eyes betrayed their uncertainty. Catelyn was brought there as well, along with Sansa, as a guest, but truly as a captive in a gilded cage. Night fell, and from the windows Catelyn saw the flickers of green flames along the Blackwater, heard the roaring fires and the clash of steel as the battle raged. She held Sansa's hand. Neither spoke. The sound of distant screams, the thunder of trebuchets, and the acrid smell of smoke drifted into the holdfast. Time blurred. She did not know how many hours passed before the thunder of war receded, and she learned that the Lannisters had won a decisive victory, thanks in part to the clever use of wildfire and a timely arrival of Tywin's reinforcements, as well as House Tyrell joining the fray. King's Landing was saved from Stannis, at least for now. In the aftermath, relief mingled with horror. The city was littered with corpses, the Blackwater's currents choked with charred ships and bodies. The cost in lives was beyond counting. Yet the throne held. Joffrey preened, rewarding the Tyrells and heaping praise upon himself. Tywin was hailed as the savior of the city, returning triumphant at dawn, riding through the gates with banners streaming. Within Maegor's Holdfast, Cersei wore a relieved smile that barely concealed her exhaustion. She spared a glance for Catelyn, who kept to the edge of the hall. It seems the crown stands secure, the queen remarked. Your son's small contribution was noted, even if it was overshadowed by the Tyrells' involvement. Let us hope Robb's men do not think they accomplished more than they did. Catelyn ignored the barb. At least the victory meant no immediate danger to Sansa. Perhaps the realm might even stabilize after this show of force. But she wondered if the war would truly abate or if new foes would arise. Sure enough, in the wake of Stannis' defeat, the crown turned its attention to other threats. Roose Bolton, one of Robb's bannermen, made unsettling moves in the north. The Greyjoys raided the western coasts. The Freys whispered discontent. The fragile tapestry of alliances threatened to unravel at any thread. Yet months slid by, and still the uneasy peace held between the North and the throne, bound by Catelyn's presence in King's Landing. She lingered in that lavish prison, keeping Sansa close, listening to every morsel of rumor that might guide her toward Arya. Every day, she wrote letters to Robb, offering him counsel, urging him to remain steadfast in his neutrality, to avoid entanglements that might lead Tywin to brand him an enemy again. Robb wrote back, describing the difficulties of ruling a vast domain and the fractious northern lords, but he persisted. Occasionally, Catelyn had cause to speak with Tyrion, who remained the hand of the king for a time until Tywin relegated him to lesser tasks. She found him cunning, blunt, and not without a sense of justice. He once confided in her that the city was growing more restive by the day, famine and plague knocking at the gates, while Joffrey's cruelty festered like a wound. "But what can I do?" Tyrion said ruefully, sipping a cup of wine. "My father will not be contradicted, and my nephew sees cruelty as a pastime." Catelyn lowered her voice. "Joffrey is dangerous. We both know it. If not for your father's leash, he would have murdered my daughter out of spite by now." Tyrion's face was grim. "That is why I remain in court, Lady Stark. If I leave, the boy king has no leash at all." It was a small comfort to know Tyrion could influence Joffrey, if only somewhat. And so Catelyn continued her vigil, counting each day she spent in King's Landing as a day her children remained alive. Sansa's presence gave her comfort, though she worried about the girl's silent sorrow and the forced smiles she wore at court functions. The city itself was a hive of suspicion. Cersei's watchers were everywhere, and so were the intrigues of Littlefinger and Varys, each playing their own game. Seasons began to shift toward autumn. The winds grew colder in the evenings, an ill omen for a realm that dreaded the approach of a long winter. In the north, the days shortened faster, and Robb wrote of first snows at the wall. Catelyn prayed that with winter would come a respite from war, though she feared the stories of things stirring beyond the wall. But that worry felt almost unreal in the snake pit of King's Landing. Throughout that time, Tywin moved systematically to crush pockets of resistance, to secure alliances through marriages and bribes, to rebuild the gold reserves of the crown. He tolerated Catelyn's presence, confident she was a symbol of the North's compliance. He might have even respected her willingness to do what was necessary. Their conversations were few but curtly civil. And then, at last, word came from a most unexpected source. Arya Stark had been found, or so rumor claimed. She was seen in the Riverlands, freed by a band of outlaws, or perhaps hidden in the retinue of some northern lord. Stories conflicted. But there was enough evidence that Arya lived. The realization filled Catelyn with trembling joy. She pressed every possible contact, Tyrion, Varys, even Baelish, to learn more. She intended to petition Tywin directly for permission to travel to the Riverlands under safe conduct to find her daughter. But Tywin refused. "We have no proof the girl is truly alive," he said. "These are but rumors. I will not have you gallivant across half the realm on a fool's errand, stirring up suspicion. The North remains at peace, and you shall remain here." Catelyn clenched her fists but offered no open defiance. She withdrew to her chambers, seething, wondering if the moment had come to risk everything. If Arya truly was in the Riverlands, perhaps she could send word through Edmure or other loyal men. Perhaps Arya might find her way north, reuniting with Robb. Days later, a raven from Riverrun confirmed that outlaws had indeed delivered a young girl to the Tully men. Though they called her Arya Stark, she was reluctant to trust anyone, half feral with suspicion after her hardships, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Edmure wrote that he was keeping her safe, planning to send her to Robb's camp for further protection. The letter ended with cautious optimism. "She is alive, sister. By the Seven, she is alive." Catelyn wept tears of relief. Her younger daughter was free. Her elder daughter was here, for all the horrors of King's Landing. And her son was king in the north, forging alliances, maintaining the peace that had saved so many from slaughter. Catelyn felt a swell of gratitude, but also heartbreak that she could not be with Arya. She realized that her bargain with Tywin Lannister had succeeded beyond her most desperate hopes. No new northern men had died in battle against the throne. Sansa was no longer at Joffrey's immediate mercy. He was restrained by Tywin's political concerns. And Arya was alive, soon to be secure in the north. The price was her own continued captivity. She had traded her freedom for her children's future, for the peace of the north. Late one night, staring at the cold moonlight spilling across her chambers, she found a measure of calm. She thought of the old gods in the weirwoods, of the prayers Ned had made. She thought of how she had once cursed herself for trusting the Lannisters. But in this strange twist of fate, she had struck a bargain with the most fearsome lion of them all and won something precious from it. What the future held, she could not say. Perhaps war would flare again. Perhaps Tywin would demand new concessions. Perhaps Robb's rule in the north would falter under the weight of winter's approach. But for now, for one precious moment, the families of Stark and Tully were spared further tragedy. The scattered members of Catelyn's family yet lived, with paths that might one day converge again. She thought of her sons, Bran and Rickon, in Winterfell under watchful guardians. She thought of Jon Snow at the Wall, if rumors of him still being there were true. And she thought of the future, of a day when the wounds of war might heal enough to allow her to return home. She rose from the bed, crossing to the window. King's Landing stretched beneath her, a labyrinth of rooftops and flickering torches. Beyond the walls lay a realm still reeling from war, with cracks in the foundation that no quick treaty could mend. But in forging an uneasy peace with Tywin Lannister, Catelyn Stark had carved out a reprieve from the endless tide of blood. She gazed up at the stars, remembering the old stories Ned would tell their children, the quiet strength of the North. In that stillness, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. She had come to King's Landing as a supplicant, bargaining with the man who epitomized all she had been taught to fear and despise. Pride had nearly destroyed her family. Humility and resolve had achieved what armies could not, a fragile but necessary peace. And if one day the wars resumed, if the shape of the realm changed again, at least she had this moment, knowing her children lived, knowing the North was spared. When morning came, the court would resume its intrigues, Joffrey would resume his pompous declarations, and Tywin would continue to manipulate the realm to his advantage. But for now, Catelyn held on to her purpose. She would remain vigilant, a mother's love turned into a shield for those she held dear. And should the day arise when the North found its footing truly secure, she would seek a way to return home, knowing that in the face of unthinkable loss, she had done what needed doing to keep her family alive. She felt Ned's presence then, faint but steady, as if he stood beside her, reminding her of the vow they once made to protect their children at all costs. In this new reality, forged with pain and sacrifice, Catelyn Stark kept that vow. And though she walked among lions, she walked with head unbowed, having won her daughters back from the brink of disaster, having spared the North from a disastrous war, and having proven that even Tywin Lannister's iron will could be tempered by a mother's unwavering determination. It was not the victory she had once envisioned. But it was, in its own quiet way, a victory she clutched like a lifeline. For all her regrets, for all the ghosts that haunted her, Catelyn Stark had made her choice, and in doing so had shaped a new destiny for herself and for the realm, one in which the swords were sheathed, however tentatively, for the sake of tomorrow. She bowed her head at the window, closed her eyes, and whispered into the coming dawn, "For my children, I would do it all again." And the wind from the east seemed to carry her words through the narrow streets and beyond the city walls toward the distant north, where a king in the name of Stark dreamed of the day his mother might safely come home. Catelyn Stark stood at the window of her chambers in Maegor's Holdfast and watched the sun slowly rise over the city she could never call home. Each dawn brought more burdens than the last, and though she had once whispered thanks that she and Sansa had survived to see another morning, now she felt only the weight of what remained undone. Arya was safe, at least, somewhere in the Riverlands or on her way to the north, but Catelyn's heart could not be at ease while they remained apart. Across the realm, her children were scattered like seeds in the wind, Bran and Rickon in Winterfell, each boy forced to grow up too soon, Robb in the field, shouldering a crown he had not asked for, Arya still half a stranger, changed by the roads she had traveled, and Sansa a prisoner dressed in finery. Yet Catelyn knew she dared not waver. Her bargain with Tywin Lannister had preserved a fragile peace that saved countless lives. Northern men no longer died screaming on southern fields, and the Tully lands no longer burned under the Lion's banner. Winter had not yet descended in full fury, so roads remained open for merchants, farmers, and travelers. The price of that peace was her own captivity, though it was more gilded than iron, guards posted at every door, eyes prying into every conversation, no chance of slipping away without risking Sansa's safety. The tightness in her chest returned whenever she considered the precariousness of it all. She reminded herself that her sacrifice had kept the realm from further butchery. If she faltered now, the violence would resume in a tide that might drown the north entirely. Footsteps sounded from the outer chamber, and she heard Sansa's soft voice accompanied by the measured tones of a guard. A moment later, Sansa entered, pale and lovely in a gown of dusty rose, the color chosen because the queen had insisted it flattered her complexion. Though she smiled to see her mother, there was a fragility in her eyes, a bruise left by everything she had endured. No matter how finely they dressed her, the memory of Joffrey's cruelties lingered, never far from the surface. "Good morning, mother," Sansa said, curtsying with the careful grace she had been forced to perfect. Behind her stood a Lannister guardsman who kept his distance but watched them both as if he might overhear sedition with every breath. Catelyn managed a gentle smile. "Good morning, my sweet girl. Did you sleep well?" Sansa's gaze flickered toward the guard, then back to her mother. "Well enough?" She took a few steps closer, lowering her voice. "The Queen has asked that I attend her and Lord Baelish this evening. I believe they plan some entertainment, or so they say." Catelyn's stomach tensed. "Peter Baelish," she murmured. "I do not like that man's presence anywhere near you, but we have no choice in the matter. Be mindful of what you say." The Queen's ears extend in every direction. Sansa nodded, a tremor in her lips. "I understand. I will be careful." Catelyn touched her daughter's cheek. "That is all we can do here. Endure and remain cautious." She brushed her fingers through Sansa's auburn hair, so like her own, though parted and braided in a more elaborate courtly style. Even this small gesture of tenderness felt risky beneath the unblinking gaze of the Lannister guard. "Go on. We will speak again tonight." Sansa departed with a fleeting smile, the guard trailing behind. Catelyn was left alone once more, her thoughts circling the same helpless anxieties. Already, she had begun drafting a letter to Robb about the latest demands from Tywin Lannister. The old lion wished for more tangible proof of the North's cooperation, shipments of timber and ore, an agreement to allow certain merchants from the Westerlands to trade in White Harbor at preferential rates. To Tywin, these were minor matters, small stepping stones to secure further wealth and advantage for House Lannister. Catelyn saw them for what they were, a slow tightening of a leash. One small concession after another. Yet refusing might reignite the war, unraveling the precarious compromise. She prayed Robb would find a delicate path. He had a gift for strategy in the field, but political entanglements were new to him. She tried to guide him through letters, but ravens could only carry so many words. How could she convey each nuance, each subtle threat, each unspoken tension in King's Landing? There was no easy answer. She dipped her quill into ink and resumed writing. By midday, she had penned and sealed her letter. A Lannister courier would carry it to the rookery. Whether the words would remain private, she could not say. There were no secrets in the Red Keep that Cersei could not eventually learn. And sometimes Catelyn wondered if the Queen took a particular satisfaction in reading her private pleas to her son. When the letter was gone, she forced herself to take a walk in the gardens. Summer still clung to the capital even though autumn's chill laced the breezes. Purple flowers drooped under the high sun and lemon trees gave off a faint, bittersweet fragrance. Guards followed her at a respectful distance. She glimpsed Tyrion Lannister by the fountain conversing with Varys. They paused at her approach. Tyrion offered a small bow. "Lady Stark," he greeted. "What a pleasant surprise to see you out and about." Catelyn studied him. Tyrion had a shrewd gaze, always calculating, but in the past weeks she had come to sense a certain empathy beneath his wit. "Lord Tyrion," she said calmly. "Master Varys." The spider smiled, dipping his head. "It is always a pleasure, my lady. I trust you find King's Landing no less interesting these days." She could taste the dryness in her mouth. "One might say that. War seems to have abated, yet tension remains." "It is the way of all courts," Varys said softly. "Whispers scuttle like mice, never truly banished. Indeed, I hear them squeaking at every turn." He gave a small laugh, airy and benign. Tyrion's mismatched eyes lingered on Catelyn's face. "And how fares the North? Or rather, how does the North fare in your letters? I should hope your son is meeting no great obstacles." Catelyn felt her spine stiffen. She could speak only in generalities under Varys's watchful presence. He faces the challenges of leadership. The North has many concerns and fewer men than it did before this war began. But he perseveres. Tyrion nodded. "Good. I wish him luck, truly. Though I suspect my father will press for certain arrangements, as he always does. Particularly with the approach of winter, trade routes, tariffs, these are the business of the hand these days." She inclined her head, acknowledging the subtext. "I am sure Lord Tywin finds commerce a more agreeable battlefield than open war. Gold is often the surer path to power, as any Lannister knows." Tyrion gave a small, mirthless smile. "A lesson he taught me early. In any case, Lady Stark, I hope you will call on me if you have need of anything. Or if Sansa does." He bowed again, this time more formally, and left her with a rustle of his cloak. Varys hovered a moment longer, smiling, then slipped away as well. She continued through the garden, absorbing the sunlight. She was no fool. Tyrion offered help because it might grant him some advantage. Yet she believed he bore genuine concern for Sansa's well-being. At least it was something. A bell tolled in the distance, summoning courtiers to a midday meal in the Great Hall. Catelyn had no appetite for the queen's public feasts. She thought of returning to her chambers to brood in silence, but decided it would do no good. If she was to keep Sansa safe, perhaps she must endure the endless gatherings and maintain her standing as an unwilling but visible guest. So she made her way to the Red Keep's cavernous hall, where lords and ladies assembled to dine. Servants bustled, carrying trays of roasted duck, spiced wine, fresh bread. The hall was alive with murmurs and a rattle of cutlery. At the high table sat King Joffrey, sullenly picking at his meal while the Queen Regent presided. Cersei's gaze flickered across the crowd, settling momentarily on Catelyn, who took a seat among lesser nobles. The hush that came over them told her all she needed to know. Half these people viewed her as an oddity, some sort of hostage lady who had dared negotiate with Tywin Lannister and lived to tell the tale. She ate little, keeping her ears open to the rumors swirling around her. Stannis had not vanished. He lingered in Dragonstone, licking his wounds. Tywin's army had battered him soundly on the Blackwater, but the man was relentless, gathering resources for another strike. Meanwhile, the Tyrells were now at the center of courtly power, with Margaery Tyrell being courted by Joffrey in a twisted reconfiguration of alliances. Sansa's betrothal to Joffrey was quietly set aside. No official pronouncements had ended it, but no one truly believed the match stood. Sansa wore no betrothal ring, and the court gossiped openly that the Lannisters would soon formalize an alliance with Highgarden, leaving Sansa Stark in a precarious limbo. Cersei, perhaps sensing Catelyn's watchful gaze, beckoned her forward. Catelyn rose and crossed the hall, ignoring the stares. She could feel the tension in every step. "You have not joined us at table in many days," Cersei said in a deceptively light tone, her emerald eyes roving over Catelyn's face. "I was beginning to think you felt too proud to share our company." Catelyn dipped her head in a modicum of courtesy. "I had no desire to appear ungrateful, Your Grace. I merely prefer quiet company." Joffrey kicked a leg of mutton on his plateboard. "Quiet company? Are you too proud to dine with the king, Lady Stark?" Catelyn forced a calm note into her reply. "Never, Your Grace. I only feared my presence might cast a shadow on festivities." She glanced at Cersei, letting her voice drop. "We all remember how tense relations once were." Cersei's lips curved in a half-smile. "Indeed, but times change. House Stark and House Lannister have found a way to coexist, have we not?" No one in earshot missed the slight emphasis on coexist. Not thrive, not unite. Just exist side by side. In this moment, Catelyn recognized that for Cersei the ideal arrangement was one where the Starks remained under watchful control while the Lannisters ascended. This was peace by suffocation. She gave a polite nod. "I am grateful for the safety afforded to my daughter and me." She tried to keep emotion from creeping into her voice, but the mention of Sansa made her heart twist. "The realm is tired of war." Joffrey looked even more bored. "War is entertaining enough if you're winning. Isn't that right, Mother?" Cersei hissed a soft "Joff" under her breath, her eyes darting to the courtiers who listened. Then she returned her attention to Catelyn. "Thank you for gracing our table, Lady Stark. You may sit if you wish or return to your seat. But know that if you isolate yourself, some might take it as a sign you are displeased with our hospitality." Catelyn met the Queen's gaze, unflinching. "I will remain, Your Grace, and take some wine." She was shown to a seat at the far end of the high table, not near the king or queen, but prominently placed so all could see her. Servants poured her a goblet and she forced herself to take small, measured sips. Words buzzed in her ears, too many voices, too many sly glances. She felt like a prize on display and offering to maintain the peace. Yet she schooled her features into composure. The only way to protect Sansa was to play this role. She longed for the quiet of the north, the scent of pines on a cold morning, the hush of falling snow, and the familiarity of hearth and home. That life felt a world away, and each day in King's Landing threatened to blur those memories. At last, the meal ended. Cersei and Joffrey swept from the hall, accompanied by lords and ladies vying for their favor. Catelyn escaped as soon as was seemly. She found herself momentarily free of guards as she stepped into a torchlit corridor. The stone walls felt claustrophobic, the flickering flames casting shifting shadows. She turned a corner and nearly collided with Peter Baelish. "Pardon me," she said curtly, stepping aside. The last time she had spoken to him at length, he had made insinuations about his undying devotion, about how he had always loved her from boyhood. She wanted no part of his illusions. He smiled, pressing a hand to his heart as if wounded. Catelyn, how I regret that our reunion is marred by such formalities. You were always one to hold a grudge, or so it seems. She tightened her lips. It is Lady Stark to you. His smile turned indulgent. Of course. Forgive me, I spoke out of habit. We were once far closer, or so I like to remember. She felt her temper flare. We were children, Peter. That was a lifetime ago. He tipped his head. So it was. I hear you spend much time in your chambers writing letters to your son. Are you certain all is well with him? The North can be treacherous. So many unpredictable lords. So many storms, both natural and political. What do you want? She asked, meeting his gaze with cold resolve. His voice remained gentle, almost pitying. I want to help. Always. And I can, you know. I have ways of moving coin, ways of discovering secrets. If you ever have a need, perhaps for Sansa's well-being, or if you grow tired of being watched at every turn, I could be of service. She narrowed her eyes. Why would I trust anything you offer? I recall how you aided Ned before his execution. Baelish's expression did not flicker, though she heard the subtle hitch in his breathing. I regret many things, my lady. And I regret none more than failing to save your husband when I had the chance. Circumstances were complicated. But now, if you find yourself in want of a friend. Friend? Her voice was low with disbelief. He spread his hands in a gesture of contrition. I will not press the point, but keep me in mind. The Queen plays a careful game and her father an even more dangerous one. They have a vision for the realm and it might not align with yours. She stared at him, anger warring with caution. No matter how many sweet words Baelish poured into her ear, she would never truly believe in his sincerity. But perhaps, in this nest of snakes, his own ambitions might align partially with her needs. I will remember your offer, she said coolly and stepped past him. Long after she had returned to her rooms, she found herself unsettled. From the arched window, she could see the spread of King's Landing below, a jumble of cramped streets and flickering lights. Near the horizon, the waters of Blackwater Bay reflected the moon's pale glow. She thought of Ned's remains, which had never been properly laid to rest beside the old kings of Winterfell. He was somewhere in the crypts of the capital, or perhaps his bones had been lost. That fresh grief mingled with the endless demands of her new life. How easy it would be to yield to bitterness, to dream of revenge. Yet she had chosen another path. She had to remind herself that vengeance might cost her living children. She was not so proud as to repeat that mistake. Time trudged on. Autumn deepened, the days growing shorter, nights turning chill. The city's mood shifted. Refugees who had once fled the war trickled back. But they found King's Landing a realm of high prices, and scrupulous merchants, and the reek of too many people crammed behind the walls. Tywin Lannister governed from the shadows, letting Joffrey hold court in a show of royal authority. The Tyrells poured wealth into the city, distributing bread in Marjorie's name to win the love of the common folk. Sansa, once touted as the future queen, now found herself overshadowed by Marjorie, though the Lannisters still kept her close, assurance that the North would remain compliant. One afternoon, Catelyn received a summons. She was to attend the hand of the king, Tywin Lannister himself, in the small council chamber. The letter bore the lion's sigil, curt and formal. Your presence is required on a matter of state. Bring no guard. She steeled herself and went as instructed. The chamber was large but dimly lit, a few candles sputtering on the table. Scrolls and ledgers lay strewn about, the air thick with the scent of parchment. Tywin sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid. In the flicker of candlelight, his green eyes shone cold, and the faint lines of age seemed carved in marble. Tyrion was also present, leaning on the arm of his seat. Pycelle hovered near a stack of dusty books, while Varys stood to one side, hands folded in the sleeves of his robes. Tywin wasted no time on pleasantries. Lady Stark, be seated. She took the offered chair, folding her hands in her lap. My lord. He spread a map on the table. It depicted the stretch of land from the Crownlands north to the Riverlands, and further up toward Moat Cailin. My riders have brought news from the western roads. The Greyjoys have harried the coastline near Lannisport again, raiding small villages, burning fishing boats. Lord Balon Greyjoy pretends at kingship as if the previous rebellion taught him nothing. Catelyn felt a jolt of alarm. She recalled how Theon Greyjoy had once been Ned's ward, her hostage for the Greyjoy rebellion's ceasefire. The boy had returned to his father's islands after Ned's death. I have heard only the slightest rumors of these raids, she said carefully. Tywin flicked a glance toward Tyrion. The dwarf cleared his throat. Father is being modest about the threat. They have not mounted a full-scale invasion, but it's enough to be a nuisance, and enough to demand a response before it grows larger. Tywin turned his attention back to Catelyn. The Greyjoys might consider attacking the north as well, if they believe the north is weakened and distracted. Your son must be prepared to repel them. An assault on the north would place you in a difficult position. She met his eyes. Robb will defend his land if need be. House Stark has no love for the Greyjoys. We fought them once before, and we can do so again. Tywin tapped a finger on the map. Good. See that he does. I would not want my western coast pillaged while the north stands idle, claiming neutrality. Her mouth tightened. The north stands neutral in your disputes with Stannis and other claimants to the Iron Throne, my lord. But the Greyjoys are reavers, not rightful kings. Defending the north from their raids has nothing to do with your war. My son will do what is necessary to protect his people. And House Lannister will consider such action a sign that our arrangement remains amicable, Tywin said coolly. Which is why I have summoned you. I wish you to write to your son and urge immediate vigilance. He must guard his coastlands, especially the rills and the stony shore. If the Greyjoys probe the western coast of the north, they could push inland. I doubt the Dreffort or Torrens Square can handle a sudden assault. Catelyn felt the weight of his demand. Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, expected her to be his intermediary, urging Robb to fight a war that benefited the Lannisters' own flank. Yet she knew the threat of Ironborn raids was real. The north was vast and undepopulated. A sudden strike could leave devastation in its wake. I will write to him, she said. But Robb has his own advisors. He sees more than I do from this distance. Tywin inclined his head, accepting that. Write to him all the same. In the meantime, the throne will send a small fleet to the western coasts of the north to discourage raiders. Let us call it an act of goodwill. Tyrion snorted softly. Assuming the Greyjoys see it that way, they might interpret a crown fleet as provocation. Tywin ignored his son's remark. Lady Stark, that is all I require of you for now. You may go. She rose, bowing slightly, but Tyrion caught her eye. I wonder if you might indulge me a moment, Lady Stark. I have a personal matter to discuss. She hesitated, her pulse jumping. Tywin gave a short nod of dismissal and Catelyn followed Tyrion out of the council chamber. They paused in an adjacent corridor lined with statues of old Targaryen kings. Guards stood at the far ends, too distant to overhear. What matter is this, my lord? She asked quietly. Tyrion eyed her with a faint quirk of his lips. You might be surprised to learn it concerns Sansa. The court is abuzz with rumor that my dear nephew will soon formalize his engagement to Margaery Tyrell, leaving your daughter untethered. My father has other designs for Sansa, though, and I am not entirely sure she would find them agreeable. Fear slid into her voice. What designs? He shrugged. He has floated the idea of marrying her to a suitable candidate loyal to House Lannister so that the North's loyalty is further bound. Imagine that, a husband who can act as your son's vassal but also House Lannister's creature. He sighed. I suppose it's better than being betrothed to Joffrey, but not by much. Catelyn felt her blood run cold. Sansa bartered yet again, this time to some lesser Lannister bannerman? Or worse, to a manipulative lord who could wedge the North under Lannister influence. Do you know who? Tyrion shook his head. Several options are bandied about, perhaps one of Lord Tywin's cousins, or a man from the Westerlands who has proven loyal. Father is waiting to see if the Tyrell alliance cements fully. If it does, Sansa's value as Joffrey's betrothed will vanish and he'll move swiftly. She swallowed. That cannot happen. My daughter deserves more than to be used again and again. Tyrion's gaze softened. Believe me, I sympathize. Yet the best I can do is warn you. If you have any influence you can bring to bear, any promises your son might make in exchange for Sansa's freedom. Catelyn's hands clenched. What promise? We have already forsworn attacking the throne, already permitted you free trade in the north. Must my son sign away his entire birthright for the sake of his sister's happiness? Tyrion's voice was low. We live in a cruel world, Lady Stark. Sometimes we must weigh the happiness of one child against the good of the many. You know this all too well, or you would never have made peace with my father. She felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Thank you for the warning, she said stiffly. If I think of any solution, I will let you know. He nodded, stepping back with a sigh. I truly wish you luck, my lady. She departed, her thoughts churning. 1,000 nightmares battered her mind. Sansa wed to some vicious brute, a lesser version of Joffrey, or Sansa forced to produce heirs loyal to the Lannisters, fracturing her allegiance to the north. The unspoken fear she had always harbored that she had done little better than Ned had when it came to protecting their daughter gnawed at her heart. That very night, she wrote another letter to Robb, revealing Tywin's designs in careful, coded language. She did not name any potential match but stressed that a marriage might bind Sansa more tightly to the west. She urged him to consider how to protect her, perhaps by forging a northern betrothal first, by proposing an alternative that Tywin might accept. But who in the north could have sufficient power or age to marry Sansa in a way that dissuaded Tywin? The Grey John? Too old. Roose Bolton's heir, Ramsay Snow, rumored to be a bastard of ill repute? Unthinkable. The Manderleys? Possibly, but would Tywin see White Harbor as a strong enough link? She sealed the letter, feeling no closer to an answer. Only dread. The following weeks brought a swirl of events in King's Landing. Margaery Tyrell was declared Joffrey's new betrothed in a lavish ceremony that dazzled the masses, flowers shipped from Highgarden, golden banners, processions through the streets. Sansa was obliged to stand among the court wearing a forced smile as Joffrey publicly recanted his earlier promise to wed her, claiming he had discovered their families were unsuited. No apology was given. Catelyn watched her daughter from afar, heartsick. Afterward, Sansa retreated to her chambers, refusing to come out for hours. Catelyn dismissed the guards and found the girl weeping into a pillow. Sansa sat up quickly, dabbing her eyes, ashamed. "Mother, I know I should be grateful to be freed from Joffrey," she began. "But the way he did it as though casting me aside like some old toy." Catelyn folded Sansa in her arms. "You owe him no gratitude. But yes, you are free of him for the moment. That is the only mercy." Sansa hiccuped a sob. "Mother, I just want to go home. Even if the north is cold, even if winter is coming, I don't care. I want to be with Bran and Rickon, with Robb, with you." Catelyn stroked her hair, trying to remain calm. "I know, sweetling, but we must be strong a little longer. I have written to Robb, and we will see if there is some arrangement that might allow you to leave this place safely." Sansa clung to her, tears dampening Catelyn's sleeve. "I hate it here," she whispered. "I hate the Queen, I hate Joffrey, I hate the way everyone looks at me." Catelyn swallowed her own tears. "I know," she murmured. "But hatred is a poison. Do not let it consume you. Hold fast to the hope of returning to your family. We will find a way." The next day, she learned that Tywin had wasted no time. He summoned Sansa to a private audience, an intimidating prospect. Catelyn was not invited, which made her insides royal. Only the Queen was to be present, along with Pycelle and a few courtiers. Sansa went, pale and trembling, while Catelyn paced her chambers, praying for some stroke of fortune. At last, Sansa returned, escorted by a stiff-faced gold cloak. The guard departed, leaving the girl to collapse into her mother's arms. "He asked me about my feelings for the North," Sansa whispered. "He said House Lannister respects that I am a daughter of Winterfell, but times are changing and I should consider more southern alliances." Catelyn stroked her hair. "Did he specify anything? A name, a match?" Sansa shook her head, voice shaking. "No. The Queen mostly said I should be grateful to have escaped that childish betrothal to Joffrey. Then Lord Tywin said, we will find a man worthy of your beauty and your courtesy, someone you can appreciate and who can appreciate the ties between the North and the West." I was too terrified to speak. Catelyn clenched her teeth. Every part of her wanted to storm into Tywin's solar and scream that Sansa was not some broodmare to be auctioned off. But such a move would only provoke the lion. She forced a steadying breath. "We will handle this carefully. Perhaps Robb can propose something else, some alternative betrothal that satisfies Tywin's sense of advantage." She managed a small, encouraging smile for her daughter, though inside she felt despair. If the Queen and Tywin had decided to press forward, they might announce a new betrothal at any time, leaving Catelyn no recourse but to watch Sansa slip further out of her grasp. Days bled into nights. The city's rumors multiplied. Talk of a splendid wedding for Joffrey and Margaery in the new year. Speculation about Stannis' next move. Concern over the Greyjoy raids. Word came that Roose Bolton had marched some men to the coast of the north, presumably to repel the Ironborn. At least that indicated Robb was acting swiftly to protect his lands. But Catelyn sensed hidden storms gathering. She wrote letter after letter, urging Robb to find an answer for Sansa. Finally, a raven arrived bearing Robb's reply. The gist, he had an idea. He would propose Sansa's marriage to Edmure Tully, her own uncle, thereby keeping her within the river region, safe and close to the north as well. Edmure was not so old as to be entirely unsuitable, though a decade and more separated him from Sansa. But Tully blood ran in Sansa's veins, so the match would be a strong tie that reinforced the alliance between the North and the Riverlands. More importantly, Tywin might prefer that to letting Sansa vanish into some other realm. Edmure was Lord of Riverrun now, after all. Catelyn's emotions tangled. She loved her brother, but he was hardly a shining knight from Sansa's daydreams. Still, the match could be a haven for Sansa, removing her from King's Landing's orbit. The question was whether Tywin Lannister would accept it. She hastily wrote back, urging Robb to formalize the proposal and present it to Tywin with all due courtesy, and perhaps some small concessions to sweeten the deal, like lowered tariffs on Riverland grain shipped to Lannisport. She spent a sleepless night awaiting Tywin's response. When the next day dawned, a messenger came. Tywin wished to see her in his solar. She went, bracing herself for confrontation. The room was austere, with a massive table scattered with documents. Tywin stood by the fireplace, one hand on the mantel, wearing a black doublet embroidered with a small golden lion on the breast. His pale green eyes flicked to her when she entered. Two of his knights lingered at the edges of the room, silent as statues. Lady Stark, TYW. Said barely more than an acknowledgement. My lord, she replied, her voice guarded. He held out a parchment. I have received an interesting offer from Riverrun. An alliance by marriage between your daughter, Sansa Stark, and Edmure Tully. This would bind the Riverlands and the North as a single power block. Do you deny it? Catelyn held herself with care. I do not deny it. My son, Robb, believes such a union would bring stability for Sansa and for both realms. Should you allow it, Sansa would leave King's Landing for Riverrun and the Tullys would become her guardians as they were mine once. Tywin's lips thinned. Indeed. A move that would remove the girl entirely from the crown's influence. Your brother would gain the advantage of hosting the daughter of Eddard Stark, someone the North might rally around. This is not a trivial matter. She swallowed. You and I both know the war in the Riverlands has ended because of the peace we negotiated. If you fear Edmure Tully will challenge the throne, that is unfounded. He is loyal to Robb Stark, who pledged neutrality. We have kept our word so far. Tywin studied her, silent. His gaze was cold, calculating. Edmure Tully is unwed, that much is true. But the Queen and I have other potential matches in mind for your daughter, matches that strengthen House Lannister rather than consolidate the Tullys and Starks. Why should I forego those prospects? Catelyn fought to keep her voice even. Because if you intend to keep Sansa here, betrothed to someone in your circle, you will only provoke resentment in the North. The men who follow my son will see it as one more way you tighten your grip. If you push too far, they might rise again. This war has cost everyone too dearly already. Tywin's stare did not waver. You threaten me with renewed war? She managed a measured breath. I do not threaten, my lord. I caution. The North would never look kindly on seeing their young princess forced into a match with someone they deem an enemy. But Edmure Tully is family, the North might accept that. Meanwhile, you maintain peace with a stable alliance. The Riverlands remain at peace as well. And you avoid shedding more Lannister blood in fruitless battles. He let the silence hang. She could almost hear the gears of his mind turning. At last, he said, your brother is Lord of Riverrun, but his forces are not inconsequential. A Stark-Tully alliance cements their control from the neck to the trident. It troubles me that such a large swath of the realm would be unified without direct ties to the throne. She forced herself to remain calm. We have no ambition beyond our own lands, my lord. All we want is to protect our people. The North is vast, but scarcely populous. The Riverlands have been ravaged by war. It will take years to recover. If you fear another rebellion, recall we have neither the resources nor the desire. Tywin folded his arms. Very well. I will consider the proposal. But I require something in return. Specifically, I want certain trade rights guaranteed for Lannisport merchants on the Trident. And I want a signed document from Robb Stark affirming that should any other claimants arise, be they Targaryens returning from across the sea or Baratheons crawling out of the woodwork, he will not ally with them nor use the Riverlands as a base to attack the crown. Catelyn let out a slow exhale of relief. These demands were steep but not unexpected. I believe my son will find that acceptable, she said. If that is your price for Sansa's freedom, I will counsel him to agree. Tywin nodded once. Then do so. But make no mistake, if there is the slightest hint of betrayal, or if your daughter spurs any rebellion, I will hold you accountable. Catelyn's chin lifted. Understood. She hesitated, then pressed, and once the marriage is concluded, you will permit Sansa to leave King's Landing and reside at Riverrun? He inclined his head, the movement short and brisk. Yes. I will not hold a married woman here against her will. But the marriage must take place in King's Landing so we may witness it and know it is done in good faith. Then, perhaps, I will allow a wedding escort to accompany her to Riverrun. She nodded slowly, heart-pounding. At least it was progress, the promise that Sansa could escape this viper's nest, that she might find some semblance of a future beyond being used as a hostage. I will write to Robb at once, she said. And to my brother. Tywin waved her away, dismissive. Do that. She returned to her chambers with a swirl of conflicting emotions. She found Sansa there, sitting by the window, hands folded tensely in her lap. The girl looked up, anxious for news. Mother, she asked, voice trembling. What did Lord Tywin say? Catelyn lowered herself beside Sansa, clasping her daughter's hands in her own. My sweet girl, there is a plan. Your uncle Edmure wishes to marry you, should you consent. He is not so very old. You remember him from when you were small, don't you? He can be foolhardy at times, but he is kind at heart and he will treat you well. More than that, he can protect you in the Riverlands and you would be free of King's Landing. Sansa's eyes went wide with surprise, tears gathering at the corners. Edmure? But he's my uncle. Is that not strange? Catelyn's chest tightened. Marriage customs among the nobility were often tangled, and marrying a cousin or uncle was not unheard of when alliances demanded it, but she could understand Sansa's shock. I know it feels strange, child. But Edmure is your mother's brother, not your father's. And he truly does wish to see you safe. The situation is dire. Lord Tywin has agreed to let you leave with Edmure if we secure certain guarantees. Sansa's eyes flickered with a tumult of emotions. Will he be good to me? He isn't cruel like Joffrey, is he? Catelyn felt tears prickling her own eyes. He would never harm you. He has a good, if sometimes prideful, heart, and he knows how important this is to protect you from the Lannisters. Sansa's shoulders sank with relief and apprehension all at once. It's so sudden, Mother. I thought maybe someday I would marry a gallant knight or a prince or someone I loved. But I don't want to stay here, not for anything. Catelyn wrapped her daughter in a gentle embrace, feeling the trembling in Sansa's frame. I'm sorry it must be like this. Truly. If there were another way, I would seize it. But we must do what we can to keep you safe. They held each other quietly, the corridors of the Red Keep echoing beyond the walls. Sansa's tears dampened Catelyn's shoulder, and Catelyn stroked her hair in comfort. At length, the girl pulled back, wiping her eyes. I will do it, she said softly. I'll marry Uncle Edmure if it means I can leave King's Landing and never see Joffrey again. Catelyn pressed a kiss to Sansa's forehead. Brave girl. I will write to your uncle and to Robb. The ceremony must happen here, but once it's done, we'll take you away, home to Riverrun. Within days, letters flew north. Robb accepted Tywin's terms, trade rights for Lannisport along the Trident, a promise of neutrality against any future challengers to the Iron Throne, and a solemn oath never to allow the Riverlands to become a staging ground for war against the Crown. In exchange, Tywin gave his blessing to the marriage between Sansa Stark and Edmure Tully. The city buzzed with the news, half in shock, half in relief that another potential Lannister gambit for Sansa had been averted. The Queen was rumored to be displeased, having wanted Sansa's future to remain in her grip. But Tywin's word was final. Edmure arrived in King's Landing with a small retinue of Tully men, a guarded entourage that traveled under the safe conduct Tywin had promised. The presence of armed Tully banners in the city was a strange sight, but Tywin permitted them within reason, stating that no harm must befall the new bridegroom. Catelyn greeted her brother in a private antechamber, her emotions swirling. Edmure looked weary but determined. Sister, he said, taking her hands in his. By the gods, it's good to see you. I wish it were under better circumstances. She managed a wan smile. So do I. But at least we have come this far without further bloodshed. He sighed. I've had little rest of late. The Riverlands still nurse their wounds from the war. Yet for Sansa's sake, I'll do this. A piece of me wonders if I can be a good husband to her, especially when I'm so occupied with ruling Riverrun. Catelyn gripped his hands more firmly. She has been through more nightmares than anyone should endure at her age. If you show her kindness, that alone will make you a better husband than the boy king she was once promised to. He nodded gravely. I will do my best. I promise you that. A pang went through Catelyn. This was not the wedding she would have dreamed for her daughter. No joyous feast, no father to walk her down the aisle, no mother of the bride beaming with unclouded happiness. Instead, a rushed ceremony in the city that had once bathed their family in grief. But it was a chance for Sansa to be free, and that overshadowed every misgiving. Preparations proceeded swiftly. The royal court sniffed at the bride, uncertain how to treat her. Some whispered about the mismatch, sneering that Edmure was a country lord from a half-ruined land, that Sansa was a naive girl. Others guessed that Tywin had orchestrated the match for some hidden purpose. Cersei kept her distance. Joffrey occasionally sneered at Sansa in the corridors, calling her my cast-off bride, but never within earshot of his grandfather. 2 weeks after Edmure's arrival, the wedding day came. It was a muted affair by King's Landing standards, overshadowed by the looming preparations for Joffrey's own grand wedding to Margaery Tyrell. Still, Tywin insisted on holding the ceremony in the royal sept within the Red Keep. Sansa wore a gown of river blue trimmed with silver, her hair styled in the northern fashion. A few daisies and small autumn roses wreathed her hair, a reminder of the Tully sigil. Edmure, clad in a doublet of Tully colors, waited at the altar with hands clasped, trying to hide his nerves. Catelyn stood near Sansa, an ache in her chest as the septons recited the vows. Candle flames danced on the polished marble floor. Robb was not there to give Sansa away, so Catelyn herself walked her daughter down the aisle, each step echoing. She could feel Sansa trembling slightly, but the girl held herself with dignity. When the final words were spoken, Edmure gently took Sansa's hands and pledged to protect and cherish her. Sansa's voice was soft but steady as she spoke her vows. No one spoke of love or passion, only duty and respect. Yet there was a solemn hope in Edmure's eyes and a flicker of relief in Sansa's. The assembled watchers included Tywin and Cersei, both expressionless as the union was sealed. Tyrion offered a courteous applause. The feast afterward was modest, some small formality in a side hall. Catelyn remained close to Sansa, relieved that the girl was no longer forced to stand near Joffrey or suffer his humiliations. Edmure was attentive if awkward, making an effort to ask about her likes and interests. Sansa answered politely, still guarded from the city's cruelty. Late that evening, after the feast ended, Catelyn escorted Sansa to the chamber prepared for the new couple. Sansa was pale as she stepped inside, wearing a plain shift, her hair unbound. Edmure lingered in the corridor, clearly summoning his courage. Catelyn squeezed Sansa's hand. "Remember, child," she whispered. "Edmure is a good man at heart. He will not hurt you." Sansa's eyes brimmed with tears. She managed a single nod, then turned away, vanishing behind the door. Catelyn stood outside for a moment, head bowed, recalling her own wedding night with Ned, how she had been equally uncertain, though Ned's quiet warmth had soothed her. She whispered a prayer to the gods that Edmure would show gentleness, that Sansa's tears might someday become smiles. 2 days later, the newlyweds prepared to depart King's Landing with their retinue. The Lannisters, having received the promised documents from Robb, did not protest. Tywin instructed a small escort of gold cloaks to accompany them partway, ensuring no bandits or roving Ironborn attacked. Cersei made a brief appearance to bid them farewell with cool courtesy. Joffrey was nowhere to be seen. Tyrion, at least, offered well wishes that rang sincere. Catelyn oversaw the packing of wagons, ensuring Sansa's belongings were loaded. The girl would need warm cloaks soon enough, for the Riverlands' autumns ran cold. Sansa clutched her mother's hands one last time before mounting a horse. "Will you not come with us, mother?" she asked, voice quavering. "I don't want to leave you here." Catelyn's eyes burned. "I want nothing more than to go home. But I must remain a surety of our peace, remember? Tywin will not let me leave the city until he feels certain the North will never rebel again. If I left now, it might unravel everything." Sansa looked stricken. "But Catelyn placed a finger to her daughter's lips. "Hush, child. Listen. You will be safe at Riverrun. Edmure has men enough to guard you. In time, if the realm remains at peace, I pray Tywin will release me to join you. Until then, know that I love you and that I have no regrets for what I've done to keep you alive." Tears glimmered on Sansa's lashes as she leaned down to embrace Catelyn. The hug was fierce, trembling, a last farewell. Then Sansa pulled away, biting her lip to hold back sobs. Edmure helped her steady in the saddle. The small procession moved out through the gate, Tully banners fluttering in the midday sun. Catelyn stood by the parapet, watching until they vanished into the city streets, heading north and west. Her heart felt torn in two, one half soared with relief that Sansa was free, the other half sank, knowing she remained behind, a prisoner in all but name. She lingered there, ignoring the stares of guards or passers-by. In that moment, an unexpected hand touched her shoulder. She turned to see Tyrion Lannister, his mismatched eyes filled with a solemn empathy. "You've done well by her," he said quietly. "Edmure may not be everything she once dreamed of, but he's a decent fellow and she's free of Joffrey. As far as bargains go, that's a victory." Catelyn nodded, her voice raw. "A victory, yes. But it doesn't feel like one. Not when I am still here." Tyrion's mouth twisted in wry sympathy. My father can be unyielding. Perhaps in time you will convince him. Until then, if you need a friend. She studied him, recalling his earlier offer. She did not truly trust him, but in King's Landing there were few she could speak to at all. So she managed a weary nod. Thank you, Lord Tyrion. He patted her arm gently, then withdrew, leaving Catelyn alone once more. She stared down the winding street where the Tully banners had disappeared, then closed her eyes, breathing in the city's foul air. This, at least, was one child spared the worst. Arya was safe somewhere in the Riverlands or the north, Bran and Rickon presumably still in Winterfell, and Robb forging a realm of his own. Only she remained in the Lion's Den, still playing this dangerous game to keep them all alive. In the weeks that followed, the Red Keep felt emptier somehow, though in truth it bustled with preparations for Joffrey's wedding to Marjorie. Minstrels practiced, cooks toiled in the kitchens, seamstresses bustled about. The Tyrell influence was everywhere, brightening the halls with flowers and embroidered silks. But for Catelyn, nothing felt bright. Her only solace was that Sansa was no longer trapped here. She heard scattered reports that Sansa and Edmure had reached Riverrun without incident and were settling into life there, forging a tenuous companionship. In time, with patience and luck, Sansa might find contentment, or at least respite from the horrors she had witnessed. Catelyn's days resumed their quiet, watchful rhythm. She woke each morning in Maegor's Holdfast, wrote letters to Robb advising him of the political currents in King's Landing, and endured the scrutinizing gaze of Cersei's retinue whenever she ventured outside her chambers. She had no illusions. As long as she remained under the Queen's eye, the North was effectively shackled to the terms Tywin had set. It was during one such routine morning that an unusual visitor arrived, a steward with the sigil of House Martell on his surcoat, requesting an audience with Lady Stark on behalf of Prince Doran's envoy. Catelyn's curiosity was piqued. Dorne had thus far remained quietly out of the conflict, biding its time. Now it seemed they had something to discuss with her. In a small receiving room, she found herself face to face with a slender, sharp-eyed Dornishman who introduced himself as Ser Quentyn Ironwood. He bowed deeply. Lady Stark, thank you for your time. I bring greetings from the Prince of Dorne. Catelyn studied him warily. Dorne has had little involvement in the war so far. What interest does Prince Doran have in me? Quentyn folded his hands. Prince Doran is aware of the uneasy peace between the Iron Throne and the North. Dorne's position has always been somewhat independent. We remember how we joined the Seven Kingdoms last of all. Now we watch carefully, for the realm stands on the precipice of further turmoil. The Lannisters are strong, but so are their enemies. Our prince wonders if House Stark might one day remember who remained neutral while war ravaged the rest of Westeros. She frowned. Are you suggesting that the North should ally with Dorne? My son has sworn neutrality. We cannot simply break that vow. I suggest nothing so rash, Quentyn replied smoothly. I merely relay that House Martell has no love for House Lannister. We remember the death of Elia Martell and her children, and who was responsible. The Lannisters have never answered for that crime. Yet we endure. Should the day come when you or your son seeks new friends, Dorne might be sympathetic. Catelyn hesitated. I am here as a hostage, Ser Quentyn. My word carries little official weight. But I will remember what you have said. He inclined his head. That is all Prince Doran asks. After he left, Catelyn mulled over the visit. Dorne's interest in forming some future alignment with the North suggested that the realm's cracks ran deeper than she had guessed. The Lannisters might rule from the Iron Throne, but not all houses had forgotten old wounds. Even as the Tyrells ingratiated themselves, the Martells lingered, resentful over past atrocities. It was another reminder that peace in the Seven Kingdoms was always precarious. But Catelyn would not allow herself to dwell on hypothetical alliances. She had worked too hard to secure the peace that currently kept her children safe. Besides, Tywin's web of power was vast. Any secret partnership with Dorne would be discovered eventually, and then the illusions of peace would shatter. She tucked away the memory of Quentyn's visit in a quiet corner of her mind, saying nothing to anyone, not even Tyrion. Winter in King's Landing was a muted affair compared to the true cold of the North. A biting wind swept through the city, but the snow rarely fell this far south. The people bundled up, complaining of a chill they scarcely understood. Catelyn wore her woolen cloaks from Winterfell, and sometimes she almost felt at home. If she closed her eyes against the stench of the city, she would dream of returning to the Godswood, of feeling the hush of snow underfoot, the old weirwood's carved face watching over her prayers. One afternoon, she wandered the royal gardens with an armed guard, lost in thought when a sudden flurry of movement caught her eye. Two small figures darted between rosebushes. She tensed, then recognized them as Tommen and Myrcella, Joffrey's younger siblings, chasing a rolling ball. They laughed softly, breath-puffing in the cold air. For a moment, they seemed like any ordinary children, untainted by the ugliness of the court. Myrcella saw Catelyn and curtsied politely while Tommen offered a shy smile. Catelyn nodded in acknowledgement, feeling a pang. They were Lannisters, or at least, everyone believed them to be Lannister children, but they were not cruel like Joffrey. She wondered if they were old enough to sense the tension that crackled around them, if they knew the devastation that lurked beyond the city walls. In that instant, she felt a strange sadness for them. War and political machinations did not spare innocence. She continued on her way, crossing a stone bridge over a koi pond, winterbear vines draping the rail. She thought of how Arya would have loved exploring these gardens once, climbing walls, hiding in corners. Sorrow squeezed her heart. At least Arya no longer had to be a bird in a cage. If the rumors were true, she was reunited with her family in the Riverlands or journeying to Winterfell. She closed her eyes, saying a silent prayer to the old gods that her daughter would find some measure of peace. Time passed, measured in the rise and fall of tension throughout the city, the slow churning of alliances, and the unstoppable approach of Joffrey's wedding. Every corridor bustled with preparations. Gold cloaks drilled more often, expecting a host of noble visitors for the festivities. Catelyn was told in no uncertain terms that she would attend the wedding as a gesture of unity, House Stark endorsing the crown's new queen. She had no right to refuse. On the day of the royal wedding, King's Landing seemed to transform. Streets were lined with banners in Tyrell green and Baratheon gold, though the Lion of Lannister was never far from sight. Tapestries draped the walls of the Red Keep, flowers perfumed the halls, and a grand feast was laid out in the throne room. Catelyn stood among the crowd, wearing a modest gown of gray silk with silver trim, her tully auburn hair pinned back. She tried to appear indifferent, but her mind reeled with memories of Sansa's betrothal to this monster and how narrowly she had escaped. The ceremony was a lavish spectacle. Marjorie Tyrell moved with regal grace down the aisle, clad in a gown that seemed half-living with fresh flowers. Joffrey preened in his golden crown, acting every bit the conquering hero who had vanquished Stannis on the Blackwater. Cersei watched with a triumphant smile while Tywin stood behind her, impassive. Tyrion lingered off to one side, sipping wine, expression carefully neutral. When the Septon pronounced them man and wife, courtiers erupted in applause. Trumpets blared, and the entire hall swelled with music. The feast afterward was even more grandiose, with course after course of exotic foods, minstrels singing ballads, jugglers performing. Catelyn remained silent, nibbling only sparingly at her plate, forced to watch Joffrey parade around like a proud peacock. At one point, the boy king passed by her table, pausing to glare at her. She inclined her head in a forced show of respect, though every fiber of her being loathed him. He sneered, but Marjorie's gentle tug on his arm drew his attention away, and they moved on. Catelyn found herself thinking of the countless tragedies Joffrey had caused. Ned's execution, Sansa's torment, the blood spilled in his name. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that open defiance now would solve nothing. Sansa was free from him, and she would not risk that. Amid the crowd, wine flowed freely, tongues loosened. A man near Catelyn's table, clearly drunk, began to sing a bawdy tune mocking Robb Stark's war. She felt anger flare, but she forced herself to remain still. A hush spread as Joffrey demanded a new performance. To Catelyn's disgust, a troop of dwarfs in mock armor trotted out, enacting a farcical version of the War of the Five Kings. One wore a wolf's head, stumbling about foolishly. Another had a stag's antlers. The court roared with laughter, and Joffrey pointed at Tyrion with cruel delight. Catelyn clenched her jaw. This was the Lannisters' reign, public humiliation of their enemies. She remembered Tyrion's earlier warnings about Joffrey's cruelty, and now she saw it plainly. The show ended in a mock slaying of each king, the dwarfs rolling over in feigned death. Cheers erupted. Joffrey demanded more wine. The queen looked perturbed, but said nothing. Before the next course arrived, the king's expression shifted to a sneer. He coughed once, awkwardly. The crowd paused, uncertain. Joffrey waved a hand as if to dismiss the moment, then coughed again, more violently. A hush rippled through the hall. Cersei rushed to his side, calling for the cupbearer to bring water. Joffrey's face turned red, then purple as he gasped for breath. People rose from their seats in alarm. Catelyn watched in shock as Joffrey staggered, eyes bulging, a strangled noise escaping his throat. Servants and guards rushed to him. The new queen screamed. The hall erupted in pandemonium. Tyrion pushed through the throng, calling for a maester. Joffrey collapsed onto the floor, clawing at his throat, foam on his lips. Moments later, he lay still. Cersei's wail tore through the air. She shrieked accusations, pointing at Tyrion, at anyone near the king. Guards seized Tyrion, ignoring his protests. Chaos consumed the hall. Catelyn stood frozen, scarcely believing what she had witnessed. Joffrey was dead, poisoned before the eyes of half the realm, on his wedding day. In the following chaos, Cersei's voice rose, demanding vengeance. Tywin barked orders, commanding the gold cloaks to seal the exits. The crowd became a panicked crush, lords and ladies shouting, some fainting. More accusations erupted. Some insisted it was the Tyrells, others swore it was Tyrion. Cersei shrieked that Tyrion had offered Joffrey the cup. Tyrion denied it, pinned to the floor by guards. Marjorie sobbed, stunned. Amid this swirling bedlam, Catelyn heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Poison, she thought, as she watched Joffrey's lifeless form. The boy king was gone just like that, and every precarious political arrangement hung in the balance. Tywin's hold on power, though still formidable, would be shaken by such a brazen assassination. The Tyrell alliance might splinter. The North's neutrality might be threatened if the blame fell on them somehow. Or if war flared again with new claimants seizing the moment of weakness. She took a step back, determined to avoid the crush of guards swarming the dais. But in that instant, she felt a strong hand clamp down on her arm. A gold cloak loomed over her. Lady Stark, the queen demands you remain here. She inhaled sharply. I have done nothing. Release me. He did not. I have orders to bring you to the queen at once. Fear spiked through her. If Cersei in her madness chose to blame the North or lash out at any perceived enemy, Catelyn could become a scapegoat. She forced her voice steady. I will come willingly. There is no need for force. The guard relaxed his grip, but kept a firm hold on her sleeve. They pressed through the chaos toward the dais. Cersei knelt over Joffrey's body, her face twisted in a mask of grief and fury. Tywin stood near, barking commands at the gold cloaks, directing them to secure the hall. When he caught sight of Catelyn, he gave a curt nod. Cersei, eyes wet with tears, glared. You, she hissed, voice trembling with rage. If you or your son had any part in this. I did not, Catelyn said firmly, meeting her gaze. We had nothing to gain from Joffrey's death, and everything to lose if it shatters the peace. Cersei looked ready to hurl more accusations, but Tywin cut in, voice like iron. We have no proof who poisoned the king. The imp has suspicious circumstances about him, but we will need a proper inquiry. He glanced at Catelyn. Until this matter is resolved, you will remain closely guarded. Do you understand? Her heart pounded. She must remain calm. I understand. Cersei's face contorted. Lock her in her chambers at the very least. Do not let her slip away. She might be part of some northern plot. Tywin's eyes flicked to the guard. Take her to Maegor's Holdfast. Post double guards. No one in or out without my permission. No one. Catelyn's pulse thundered, but she forced her chin up. The gold cloaks dragged her away, while behind her, the screams and cries of the wedding feast continued. She tried to catch Tyrion's eye as she passed. He was being hauled in another direction, but he was lost in the crush of soldiers, and so she was led away from the hall, the world spinning around her. Joffrey Baratheon Lannister truly was dead. The court would be turned on its head, alliances shaken like dice in a gambler's cup. She could sense that the fragile peace she had forged with Tywin might unravel in the storm of suspicion that followed. And now, more than ever, she was powerless, locked away as the Lannisters sought to quell their panic. In her guarded chambers, she sat at the edge of the bed, trembling. She prayed that Sansa was far enough away not to be implicated, that Robb remained safe in the north, that Tywin would keep his head and not lash out blindly. She dreaded what the morrow would bring. Throughout the night, she heard shouting in the corridors, the tramp of boots, the metallic clang of swords. King's Landing was in an uproar, and she was caged at its center. Sleep did not come. She waited for dawn, uncertain whether the new day would bring war, vengeance, or some shred of reason. At last, the first gray light crept through the shutters. She remained upright, arms wrapped around herself. A knock sounded at her door, and a guard entered, flanked by another. "The Lord Hand wishes to speak with you," he said curtly. She nodded, steeling herself. "Lead on." They escorted her down twisting corridors to a small council chamber where she found Tywin sitting alone at a heavy table, a single candle flickering. He looked as though he had not slept either. Shadows carved hollows under his eyes. At her approach, he waved a hand to dismiss the guards. They departed, leaving her standing before him in the tense silence. Tywin studied her with those cold green eyes. "Sit," he said, voice barely above a murmur. She eased into a chair, back stiff. "My lord." He folded his hands on the table. "Joffrey is dead. My grandson. I imagine you do not weep for him." She kept her voice calm. "He was cruel. But I had no hand in his death, nor did my son." Tywin's eyes flickered with a trace of bitterness. "I am inclined to believe you. You had far more to lose than to gain by such a deed. The North has no advantage in removing Joffrey and plunging the realm into chaos." She exhaled softly. "I thank you for that measure of fairness." He shifted, looking more weary than she had ever seen him. "The city is in turmoil. My daughter demands heads, my grandson Tommen is now the rightful king, but half the realm is uncertain if the Tyrells had a role in this. Tyrion stands accused by Cersei's word, though I am not convinced. It is a grievous tangle." She closed her eyes for a moment. "What does that mean for me?" He was silent. After a tense pause, he spoke. "We have no reason to suspect the North in this matter. But I cannot risk you fleeing the city or stirring trouble in my moment of weakness. You will remain in custody, under guard. If you attempt to leave, we will interpret it as treachery." Catelyn swallowed. At least he had not threatened her life. "I have no intention of fleeing, my lord. My family is scattered. My son has sworn neutrality, and I am tired of war. I only wish to see my children spared." Tywin's mouth tightened. "Then you shall do as I command. You will remain quiet. Quell any rumors that you had a hand in this. You will not question the throne's justice or cast suspicion on any parties. We will handle the investigation. When we have found the culprit." He trailed off, and she sensed the deep uncertainty behind his mask. Even Tywin Lannister, usually so certain, was thrown off balance by Joffrey's sudden murder. She lowered her head. "I will abide by your will. I am not a fool. I know what is at stake." He nodded, curt. "Then we have an understanding." She rose slowly, the tension in her limbs aching. "I am sorry for your loss, my lord. Joffrey was your grandson." Tywin's face was unreadable. He was indeed. With that, the guards returned to escort her out. She did not miss the fatigue in Tywin's posture, or the flicker of resignation in his eyes. For all his iron will, even he could not control every thread of fate. The lion had lost a piece of his legacy. In the days and weeks that followed, King's Landing reeled. Joffrey's funeral was a somber affair. The city in official mourning, black banners hanging from towers. Tommen Baratheon was proclaimed king of the Undulls, Rhoynar, and the First Men, a boy barely old enough to rule. Cersei hovered protectively, her grief turning to bitterness. She ranted against Tyrion, demanding he be tried and executed for regicide. Tyrion insisted on a trial by combat, naming Prince Oberyn Martell, recently arrived in the city, as his champion. The swirl of politics grew more complex than ever. Through it all, Catelyn remained confined to her chambers or escorted carefully when she ventured out. She was allowed no visitors save for a few servants who brought meals. Letters to Robb were still permitted, but she could sense the watchers reading over her every line. And each day, she worried that the trial or the city's upheaval would spark a new wave of reprisals that might crash over the north. Tyrion's trial began in earnest, a spectacle that drew lords from all corners. Catelyn heard second-hand accounts of the drama. Witnesses trotted out to claim they saw Tyrion handle the king's cup, or heard him speak ill of Joffrey. Tyrion made scathing retorts, but the outcome seemed certain. Cersei wanted his head, and many in the court were content to let him fall, blame pinned neatly on the dwarf. The city whispered that the real culprit might be the Tyrells, but no one dared accuse the new queen's family so openly. On the day of the trial by combat, the Red Keep bristled with guards. Catelyn was not permitted to attend. She paced her chamber, anxiously awaiting news. At dusk, a guard arrived to inform her, in a dull monotone, that Prince Oberyn Martell had died in the fight against the crown's champion, Ser Gregor Clegane, though the mountain lay mortally wounded. Tyrion was condemned, but he vanished in the chaos. Some said Jaime Lannister helped him escape. Others whispered of Varys' involvement. Whatever the truth, Tyrion was gone, and Cersei flew into a rage. She demanded a search of every corner, but Tyrion slipped away, leaving his fate unknown. The trial's fallout only fanned the flames of confusion. Tywin roared at his guards for failing to secure the prisoner. Cersei wept tears of fury. Whispers claimed Tywin was found dead soon after, shot by a crossbow while in the privy, though the details were muddy. The rumor spread like wildfire. Tywin Lannister had been killed, some said by his own son in a final act of vengeance. Others claimed Tyrion had an accomplice. The city reeled again. Joffrey dead, Tyrion escaped, Tywin murdered. The unstoppable lion had fallen in the most ignominious manner. When confirmation reached Catelyn's ears that Tywin was indeed dead, she sat on her bed in numb disbelief. This was the man with whom she had forged peace, the man who had orchestrated so many moves in this war. With him gone, the Lannisters' hold on power might fracture. Cersei would cling to the regency for Tommen, but she lacked her father's discipline and strategic mind. The realm could again descend into anarchy. She realized, with a sinking heart, that her own status in King's Landing might become more precarious without Tywin's authority to protect her from Cersei's vengeance. Every concession had been negotiated through Tywin. Would Cersei now see Catelyn as an enemy to punish? Would she hold her ransom or simply discard her? The next morning, a troop of gold cloaks marched into her chambers. Their captain, a grim-faced man, announced that by the Queen's command, Catelyn Stark was to be placed under stricter confinement in the dungeons, for the security of the realm. She had no chance to object before they seized her arms and dragged her away. She struggled, but the men were too strong, their grips bruising. They escorted her down winding steps into a dank corridor lined with cells. The stench of mildew and old straw filled her nose. They flung her into a small cell with stone walls and a heavy iron door. A single torch guttered in the corridor outside. She stumbled to her knees, scraping her palms on the rough floor. The door slammed shut, the key turned, and she heard the guard's boots recede. She sat there, panting, staring at the dirty floor. After everything, her negotiations, her loyalty, her cooperation, she was cast into a dungeon. Ned had once been held in a cell like this, awaiting a trial that ended in his execution. Fear twisted inside her like a knife. Would she meet the same fate, now that Tywin was gone and Joffrey was dead? Hours passed in gloom. A jailer shoved a bowl of thin stew through a slot along with a hunk of stale bread. She ignored it, heart too heavy to care for food. She realized how dire her situation was. Cersei, in her grief and fury, might blame the Starks for her father's death. Or she might use Catelyn as a bargaining chip against Robb. Without Tywin's guiding hand, reason could be lost in the swirl of vengeance. She huddled in the corner, wrapping her cloak around her. A single question drummed in her mind: could Robb or any ally intervene to save her? Sansa was safely in Riverrun, but powerless to challenge the Queen. Arya was out of reach, Bran and Rickon children in Winterfell, and no help was likely to come from the Vale, for Lysa was too reclusive. Perhaps Edmure or Robb might attempt a diplomatic rescue, but with Tywin gone, who in King's Landing would honor any treaty? She dozed fitfully, nightmares plaguing her with images of Ned's final moments, Sansa's tears, Arya lost in a crowd. When she jerked awake, she heard the shuffle of boots outside her cell. A guard opened the door, letting in a spill of torchlight that made her squint. Another figure stepped in. She blinked to see Peter Baelish standing there, dressed in dark finery, a faint smile on his lips. Her stomach churned at the sight of him. "My lady," he said softly, "I wish it were under better circumstances." She forced herself to stand, wiping the dust from her gown. "What do you want, Peter?" He surveyed the cramped cell, wrinkling his nose. "Such a dreary place for you, Catelyn. It pains me to see it. But perhaps we can remedy this." She gave a mirthless laugh. "Somehow I doubt you've come to bring me comfort." He pursed his lips. "I recall offering you help before. You spurned me, but now your circumstances have changed rather drastically. Tywin is gone, Cersei is consumed by grief and paranoia, the city is on the brink of another wave of violence. And you are here, at the mercy of your old friend." His eyes gleamed with a mix of cunning and something that tried to look like tenderness. "But we are friends, aren't we, Cat?" She bristled at his use of the childhood nickname. "You speak too freely. I have no illusions that you do anything without some advantage for yourself." His smile widened. "Very true. But sometimes those advantages align. You have always been dear to me, and I cannot bear to see you rot in a dungeon, especially after you sacrificed so much to save your children. Let me help you escape. I can arrange a ship, a disguise, safe passage from the city. You could slip away to the Vale or to the Riverlands." Catelyn's breath caught. Freedom. The chance to leave King's Landing to rejoin her family. It seemed impossible. Yet Baelish claimed to have the means. She eyed him warily. "And in return? What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. "I want to know that you'll remember who saved you. That you'll consider me an ally. And if, in the future, I have need of the North's support, you might encourage your son to reciprocate. I have plans, my lady, dreams for the future of this realm. If Robb Stark is not my enemy, that could be useful indeed." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "You would have me promise that Robb will support your ambitions?" He shrugged. "I ask only that you speak well of me to him, that you remember me fondly when alliances are forged in days to come." He gazed at her with that old, unwavering intensity. "A small price for your freedom and perhaps your life." A wave of revulsion warred with the desperate desire to see her home again, to hold her children. She knew Peter Baelish's designs could be murky and self-serving, but was she in any position to refuse? If she remained in Cersei's dungeon, death might come swiftly, or endless captivity at best. She closed her eyes, thinking of Sansa in Riverrun, Arya somewhere in the north, Robb struggling to maintain his realm, Bran and Rickon in Winterfell. Ned's memory loomed, reminding her how pride had once cost them everything. Would she spurn Baelish's help out of pride, or bargain with him for the sake of her family again? When she opened her eyes, she kept her voice firm. "If you can truly help me escape and return me to my children, I will not forget the debt I owe. I cannot speak for my son's decisions, but I will not urge him to stand against you if your aims do not threaten the North." Peter's smile was triumphant. Spoken like a true Tully. "I will make arrangements. We must move soon, before the Queen issues any new orders. You will hear from me within a day, perhaps two." He glanced around the cell. "Endure this a little longer, Cat." She turned away, her stomach twisting with guilt and foreboding. But she forced herself to speak quietly. "All right, Peter. I will wait." He bowed, his eyes lingering on her face in a way that made her skin crawl. Then he swept out, closing the door. The guards locked it again. Alone in the darkness, Catelyn trembled. She thought of Tywin's final warnings, of the ephemeral peace she had once fashioned. That peace had died with Joffrey and Tywin, strangled by the intrigue of the Red Keep. She had done everything in her power to keep her family safe, but now, in this final hour, she saw how quickly fortunes changed. She waited, fearing at any moment that the door would open to reveal a royal executioner. But the hours stretched on, and eventually the guard delivered another meager meal. Catelyn forced down a few bites, unwilling to face whatever came next on an empty stomach. The torch in the corridor sputtered out, replaced by another sometime later, leaving her sense of time in disarray. She dozed, roused only by the scuttling of rats or the distant echo of boots. Nearly 2 days passed before Baelish returned, this time in the company of a pair of gold cloaks who said nothing. He unlatched the door, giving Catelyn a quick, tense glance. "Come," he urged. "Now. Before the Queen realizes you're gone." Alarm flared. "How?" He pressed a finger to his lips. "I have friends in the right places or the wrong ones, depending on your view. Let us simply say that with Lord Tywin's death, the city is rife with men willing to look the other way for the right price." Quickly. She stepped out of the cell, her legs stiff. The gold cloaks flanked them, one ahead, one behind, as they hurried along the dim corridors. Twice, they paused at intersections, letting other patrols pass. Her heart hammered, certain that at any moment they would be discovered, swords drawn. But Peter pressed on, guiding her through lesser-known passageways. They emerged into a narrow courtyard behind the kitchens where a simple wagon waited, driven by a cloaked figure. Night enveloped the city, the sky moonless. "Get in," Peter whispered. She climbed into the wagon, half expecting a betrayal, but the driver clicked his tongue and they rolled forward. Peter hopped aboard, settling beside her. The gold cloaks slipped away, apparently done with their part in the subterfuge. Silence cloaked them as the wagon rattled through the darkened streets. Guards at the city gates might ask questions, but Peter brandished a writ of passage, stammering something about delivering urgent supplies. The gate captain, bribed in advance, waved them through. Once they were beyond the walls, the crisp night air filled Catelyn's lungs, laced with salt from Blackwater Bay. The wagon trundled toward the harbor, weaving between shuttered warehouses. Docked ships loomed in the gloom. "There," Peter whispered. "I've arranged a ship to carry you to the Vale. From there, we can find a path north or to the Riverlands, whichever is safer. Lisa will likely grant you shelter." Catelyn considered that, anxiety gripping her. Lisa's mental state was always precarious, but it might be her only refuge now. Or perhaps once she reached the Vale, she could slip away and make for Riverrun or Winterfell. Anything was better than rotting in the dungeon. They disembarked at a small pier. A sullen-faced deckhand motioned them aboard a modest, single-masted ship. No one spoke as the sails were readied in hushed efficiency. Peter followed her up the gangplank, guiding her to a cramped cabin. He offered a tight smile. "This is it. You'll be safe here for the moment. The captain will sail before dawn, catching the tide. The queen will not learn of your disappearance until tomorrow. By then, we'll be well out to sea." She swallowed her unease, giving a single nod. "Thank you." He took a step closer, daring to reach for her hand. She allowed him to take it, though she felt an inward recoil. "You may not believe it, but I do all this because I care for you, Cat. I always have." She looked at him, remembering the boy he had been and the man he had become. She could not reconcile them. "I believe you do it because you see some benefit," she murmured, carefully removing her hand. "But I will not spurn your help tonight." He forced a smile. "That is all I ask for now." He bowed with exaggerated courtesy. "I must return to the city before the guards question my absence. Soon enough, we'll be reunited in a safer place." With that, he left the cabin. Catelyn heard his footsteps recede along the deck, then vanish. She sagged onto the narrow bunk, exhaling a shaky breath. She was free, or on the brink of it. Free from the dungeon, free from the suffocating terror of King's Landing, though she knew Baelish's assistance carried its own shackles. The ship's timbers creaked, sails snapping in a faint breeze. She let herself lie back, exhaustion claiming her. For the first time in countless nights, she allowed a faint glimmer of hope. She would reach the Vale or beyond, then find a way back to her family. Yet fear still coursed in her veins. With Tywin dead, who held the realm together? Would Cersei's rage boil over, igniting war once more, perhaps against the Tyrells, or the Martells, or even the North? Would the Greyjoys seize this chaos to ramp up their raids? The Seven Kingdoms felt like a vast tinderbox, waiting for the next spark. Catelyn curled into herself on the thin mattress, thinking of Ned's face, of how he had died in the same city. She had negotiated with Tywin to spare her children, forging a peace that had lasted through victory feasts and precarious bargains, only to see it crumble under the weight of intrigue. Yet she did not regret her choice. That peace had allowed Sansa to escape, kept Arya alive, shielded the North from further slaughter. She had achieved more than Ned's doomed sense of honor ever could. But now, with chaos unleashed, she feared for Robb, for the North's delicate independence, and for the future of all her children once again. The sky outside began to lighten, a sign that dawn was near. She felt the vessel shift, heard the sailors call to one another, the anchor drawn up. A gentle lurch announced they were underway, gliding from the dock out into Blackwater Bay. The city's lights receded behind them. Catelyn sat up, peering through the tiny porthole. She caught a final glimpse of the Red Keep's silhouette against the pale sky. Once, that fortress had taken Ned from her, had nearly devoured Sansa, and had locked her in a cage. Yet it had also been the stage where she'd forged her desperate treaty with Tywin Lannister. Had she altered the course of history, if only for a short time? She had bought months of peace, priceless months in which her children survived and scattered to relative safety. Was that enough? She let out a long breath. In a world as brutal as this, perhaps it was all anyone could hope for, to shield those they loved for as long as they could. She thought of Sansa, no longer forced to be queen to a sadistic boy, of Arya, free from the Lannisters' grasp, of Robb, forging a new kingdom in the north, of Bran and Rickon, safe in Winterfell. Those victories came at the price of her own freedom, her pride, and ultimately her illusions that any peace could last forever under Tywin's iron watch. Still, it had been worth it. Now she sailed into an uncertain future once more, this time with Peter Baelish's shadow looming behind her. But even that was better than awaiting an execution in Cersei's dungeon. The North was still far away, but she was no longer powerless. She was Catelyn Stark, who had weathered heartbreak and war, who had bargained with the mighty Tywin Lannister and, for a time, won the peace she sought. If the world could be changed once, perhaps she might change it again. As the ship's sails caught the wind, she whispered under her breath, "For my children, I would do it all again." Then she turned from the porthole, bracing herself for the next chapter of her journey, heart heavy yet unbroken, guided by the single truth that had sustained her through every trial. Love was stronger than pride, stronger than fear, and stronger, even, than a kingdom's wrath.